Thank you. So, Mr. Brown, to be clear, has Booster Fuels sort of abandoned this MOU process that was described before in the initial variance petition, and you're not really going that route anymore?
We did, Vice Chair. We got to the point where we thought, well, look, we're making enough progress by ourselves in reaching out to these fire departments and building relationships with them and getting them to set up a new permitting framework and issue permits, that it's probably not a good use of everyone's time, including the districts anymore, to actually need that MOU process, because we've been quite successful by ourselves. So we've unlocked quite a few of them. There's just a few to go.
All right. So exactly what relief are you seeking? Are you trying to extend until December 31st the rule prior to July 1 so that you do not need a writing from a fire department of approval? You do not need a writing that it don't require any sort of process for these site-specific permits? Exactly what in that context are you seeking?
Yeah, you've identified the two ones which I think are important, and we're saying, can we operate while we continue to try and get those fire approvals and continue to try and get those site-specific permits for increased throughput? We just want to be able to operate now for our customers and our employees while concurrently we keep doing what we're doing and try and get all of those permits. But we're just conscious that it's going to take months in some cases to get it done. And obviously that's tough for a small business like ours.
And in this interim of your proposal till the end of the year, are there any throughput or volume limits? I'm thinking of how that might tie into condition 18 and what that means in this regard.
Sorry, that's a reference to permit condition 18?
Yeah, well, actually, section 8, I think it's section 18 of your petition.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. That says that
I see.
you considered you're willing to curtail operations is what you say there.
This will be a good question for UTN from Ramble, but we are saying that for each tanker we will commit to only dispensing 1,500 gallons per day, which will mean that there will be less than 1 pound a day of total excess VOC emissions. And we have all the math there, but probably the better person to answer that question is our environmental engineer, Yi.
Okay. Again, am I to understand that right now, unless a fire department has expressly told you no, you can and are operating, but you cannot exceed the limits that conditions 41 and 42 impose on you, and that's the real problem?
Well, actually, now we can't operate at all as of July 1 because of the Rule 461.1. We had to shut down, I think it was about 16 customer sites, and say we can't operate unless we have a variance.
All right. Originally, I thought that Mr. Thomas Samak had mentioned that your petition might have originally asked for November 30th, and now it's December 31st. Is it accurate? You just feel you need a little bit more time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just felt like we're 1 month on. We were asking for 5 months, and now it's 1 month later. So I wondered if we could shift it forward to the end of the year. And look, we understand how difficult these asks are of the board and with your mission, but we feel like that would give us adequate time to get all of the written fire approvals and the throughput dispensing limit increases in place and to operate fully in compliance.
All right. On your slide 12, you mentioned there were 16 customers that you ceased operations. Were those, how are those selected? How do they get into that category? If there's any 1 or 2 reasons why?
The only reasons would be if we didn't have a written fire approval for them. That was basically it, because if we didn't have the written fire approval, we couldn't ask for the increase in throughput, and we couldn't go through any process to do public noticing near a school. So we paused all of those accounts until they were fully permitted, or until we had a variance to operate while we were trying to permit them.
Now, Booster Fuels agrees that if a fire department expressly says you can't operate, there's nothing this hearing board can do about it in terms of its action, correct?
100% correct.
All right. And I understand that the AQMD has now issued at least 2 site-specific permits to operate under new rule 461.1.
That's correct. 2 out of, I think, the 9 that we've submitted. And we've just been hesitant to submit them because we know there's not much capacity at the district and that they won't approve them without the written fire approval. which we've been working on.
Have you seen the proposed possible variance condition that the district submitted, I guess this morning or last night?
I have.
Okay. I just want to be clear as to what, to the extent you can answer. If not, we can turn to your attorneys or others later. What are the problematic provisions there from your standpoint?
So again, we appreciate the district trying to at least
Do you
accommodate.
have it available to you?
Yes, I have it in front of me, Vice
Okay,
Chair.
so condition 1, or proposed condition 1, if we would. Does Booster Fuels have a problem with that?
Nope.
Okay. And condition 2, I understand that you've agreed essentially not to operate in this variance period within 1,000 feet of a school, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And condition 3, you have a problem with that, I take it?
Yes, we do.
All right. Now, what about going down to like 5 and 6, essentially conditions for some sort of, less than written approval document from a fire department or declaration, et cetera? Do you have a problem with that process set forth in 5 and 6?
We do, because parts 4, 5, and 6, they still require us to fully comply with condition 19 in our permits, which says that we need written fire approval. And they give an alternative, and the only alternative is if we get verbal approval. Now, we often get verbal approval, is the way we've tried to explain it, but that's not the only reason that fire departments are held up at the moment. Many of them just haven't had the time. They're focused on wildfires. They want to put in place a permitting regime, and they want to do it in a written form. They want to do it properly. And so we need to wait for that, and we're working with them to help set it up. So it wouldn't be enough for us just to get an accommodation from the board to get verbal fire approval. We actually need a waiver from the rule itself, because that's not what every fire department is going to do.
Okay, you lost me there, because the condition 4 says that you comply with 19 unless you go through this 5 and 6 process.
So I guess I'm not being clear in my explanation. So the lack of it, the lack of fire approval being written is not the only challenge. It's that sometimes they can't give it approval at all yet, written or verbal, because they haven't put the process in place. And we're trying to help them put the process in place. And we've been very successful in doing that with a number of jurisdictions, but not all of them. So some of the fire departments are saying, we want to put in place a proper permitting regime. We're not going to do verbal, but it's going to take us some time. We're still working it out. We're fighting wildfires. When we're done, we're going to give you an actual permit to operate. It'll be in writing. And so this covers the ones that want to do it verbally, if any do. And we, we've been encouraging them to put actual permitting processes in place and to have this buttoned up and to have written approval. So we haven't been seeking verbal approval from any of these fire departments. We've been trying to comply with 461, which requires written verbal approval. So that's what all the fire departments are now trying to do, rather than give us verbal. We in the past operated on a handshake and a verbal undertaking, but now the rule requires written, and that's what we've been encouraging departments to do, and that's what they are doing.
All right. And then I think skipping down to their proposed condition 9, I think it's just a question of semantics, where they say it should only apply to locations that were established prior to July 1st, and you've agreed that you will only apply to if we granted the variance to existing and contracted customers, correct?
That's correct.
All right. No further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pearman. One question kind of tags on to what Mr. Pearman was asking. Have you gone to the state fire marshal to try to do it from the top down?
We haven't this time, because we've been told it needs to be what's called the AHJ, which is the authority having jurisdiction, and that's each individual fire department. But we did originally, I think some years ago, work with CAL FIRE. We needed their express written permission for the executive order that we got from the California Air Resources Board certifying our technology. So we have that relationship and have done it in the past, but I don't think that they're the appropriate jurisdictions here. But you've got good experience with this, so you may know better.
Well, that's why I'm saying this, because the state fire marshal was obviously different than CAL FIRE. And CAL FIRE normally butts up to like US Forest Service, and that's normally their area, and then the cities take over from there. But, and I was gonna save this for deliberation, but it's what this California Fuel Cell Partnership did, because right now there are over 20 hydrogen refueling stations within South Coast AQMD. There's also some up the state, but in our area, we have approximately 20. And they started at the state fire marshal's office. And once they got approval, if you will, from the state fire marshal, the rest of them fell into place because that's the top of the heap. And then state fire marshal got a hold of the others, the listed cities, and they were able to, through the fire agencies, of course, get approval. And I think you're doing it from the bottom up versus doing it from the top down. And I think you'd have more success if you got a higher authority like the state fire marshal, not Cal Fire, state fire marshal, to get approval from that point and then go to the various local agencies, fire agencies, whether it's county or whether it's city. I think you'd be more successful. Obviously, hydrogen is a much more controversial fuel than gasoline. So if they were able to do that with hydrogen, and there's that many stations right now that are operating and open, I would think that you would be more successful that way.
It's a really good point, Madam Chair. We actually did get approval from the state fire marshal for our operations. And you make a really good point that we should try and leverage that to go top down rather than bottom up. I think gasoline has definitely been around for a long time. It's the mobile dispensing of gasoline, which I think is a really new and disruptive industry, which is, I think, why we're here today. It's something we have to continuously explain to policymakers and how we do it and what the safety precautions are from a fire perspective and a net quality perspective. But you're right, I think we probably could leverage that state fire marshal relationship better to filter top down rather than bottom up. So I think absolutely we'll try and deploy that in the coming weeks and months.
And I think you'd be probably more successful. Plus you would have the clout of that state fire marshal's approval to be able to even bring it to the AQMD. But I just have major concerns that I'm not happy with a verbal approval. I want to see it in writing, and or I want to see that they were contacted and exactly who was contacted and what their determination was. Because right now it's just, to me, it's hearsay. And
yeah, I think we agree. We don't want to do it verbally either. We think that we should comply in full with Rule 461.1 after the variance period. We just want more time to get written fire approval. We don't actually think verbal is enough either, and that we want to fully comply with 461.1, and we're working with those fire departments to get their processes in place for written fire approval so that we can fully comply.
And you're aware of the fact that a regular variance is normally 90 days. And well, and I'll read it to you exactly what's on our definition here, is that it can be granted for more than 90 days, but must include increments of progress if compliance is expected to exceed 1 year's time, which in this case it's not. You're asking maybe another 2 months after that 90-day period. So even that is going to have to be worked out if we were to go along with this. So
we wouldn't propose to go. We are aware, and we wouldn't propose to go any longer than the end of the year, and we would be happy to work on schedule increments of progress with the district and work out what some agreed milestones would be. And as I said, we'd be happy to undertake any additional reporting that the district needs as well to be fully transparent in our operations.
Okay, Mr. Balagopalan, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a few questions, but I just want to set the record straight. Regular variance can be granted up to a year And then you have more than a year, they have increments of progress. It's not limited to 90 days.
I know it's not
question-
limited to, just at what it said. Here is what I wanted to make them aware of, what the definition is off of this, our reference guide. So yes, I'm aware of that.
We understand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Brown, when we saw that the landscape facility in Fontana, are all fueling done outside? Do you do in the parking lot?
It's all
Garage,
done
I mean, parking
on the
garage.
on the private site. Yeah, in the customer's private site in their parking lot. Correct. Never
Not
done
in a
public
parking
space.
garage or anything.
It can't be indoors. It has to be outdoors, and it's always done in an outdoor parking lot. Correct.
Okay. So you don't have a canopy or anything like that. It's out in the open. Okay. Let me ask you, there is a condition on the approval that when the executive order from CARB, which says, and I shall read it, booster shall obtain all required permits from local fire agency and or Coupa where required. What is your understanding of that condition? And how are you getting, how does San Diego and other air districts that you mentioned dealing with that?
It's a great call out. The key language there is if required and as required. So it's only if the local jurisdictions actually require something, then we're required to do it. And many just don't. They're just not. They don't regulate this industry in the same way, and so they don't have requirements that we are that we have to comply with. So the CARB just says if they've got rules, follow them, and we always do. But if they don't have rules, then there aren't the rules there.
Okay, I'm not talking about the air quality agency. I'm talking about because it says local fire agencies.
Yes, so that's what I'm referring to. So a local fire agency may not have any of those rules that you described. They may not have adopted them. So if they don't, then there's no requirement to comply with. It says we have to, that CARB EO says, executive order says, if a local fire jurisdiction has rules, you must follow them. And we always do, if those rules exist.
Okay. My last question, at the last hearing for the interim, you mentioned you were hiring a contractor to help you negotiate some of this approval. Is that still ongoing with the?
It is, and it's been enormously successful. They are working with these fire departments, admittedly, Madam Chair, from a bottom-up perspective, which may not be the right strategy, but they are getting permitting regimes in places with these fire departments that we were finding difficult to unlock ourselves.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pearman?
Yeah, just one more follow-up. I'm a bit confused though, because essentially in response to Mr. Balakapan's question about the Cal Fire, you said if they don't require it, then we're okay. But isn't that what the district's proposal, at least as to item 4 and 6 states? It just says under 6, you know, if they've told you they don't require something, just give us a statement to prove that to us. How is that different?
Well, it's a good question. It also says under 4, the petitioner shall fully comply with condition 19 of its permits to operate, and with the district rule 461G4 and K2G at all dispensing locations. That says the condition 19 says you have to have written fire approval. And as I've said, not all of the fire departments have that process in place to give written fire approval, which is what we're trying to achieve to fully comply with the letter and the spirit of Rule 461.1.
Okay, well, we'll ask the district about that, but I mean, the condition says you shall comply unless, and then it gives you an option. If we gave you the variance, you would have to comply except as required here. So at least as far as that issue goes, it seems to me the district's proposing something similar to what you admit you deal with based on the state requirements. They just have a certain documentation to prove that non-requirement status from the local agency.
Yeah, it's fully obviously within the district's authority to do that. It's just it won't solve the problem for us because the fire departments at the moment are not planning to give verbal approval. That we are working with them to put in place written approval processes, as is asked by Rule 461.1. So we're trying to comply with the district's rule, and that means we're trying to get written fire approval. So a carve out for verbal approval doesn't help in this situation because that's not currently what the fire departments are giving us.
Nothing further, Madam Chair.
Thank
Nothing
you.
further.
Any more questions from board members? Okay, Mr. Height, do you have a witness that is not going to be duplicative of what we've already heard? It's going to be something new and different?
Madam Chair, what we offered to the board here is if they had specific questions that were tailored to more technical issues, Ms. Tian from Ramble is available to answer any technical questions, but we did not have anything further to add to the presentation that we've already given.
Okay. Mohan, did you have any other technical questions that you wanted to ask Ms. Tian?
Yes, I do have a few follow-up questions with Ms. Tian. So after Mr. Tomasawa, I mean, if you could bring her, Mr. Hyde.
She's standing by and ready to go. So
Yeah, she just needs to make herself visible. There she is. And Ms. Tian, you did take the oath this morning? Okay, so if you can just state your name, you're muted right now. If you can state your name and your position and how long you've been with them.
My name is Yi Tian. First name is Y-I. Last name is T-I-A-N. I am a senior managing consultant at Ramble, previously Environ International. I started with this company in January 1998.
Okay, Mr. Balagapan, go ahead.
I think Mr. Tomasawa maybe first, and if he has any question, then I can go.
Mr. Tomasovic?
Thank you. Ms. Tian, are you familiar with the operations of the petitioner in this case?
I would have to say I am not deeply involved in their operation. We're their air quality consultant. Our focus is air emission calculation, human health risk assessment, and application preparation.
Are you familiar at all with their operating records?
Yes.
How often will one of the trucks go to the bulk terminal to get refilled? Will they do that more than once a day?
It's possible.
Is it common?
How do you define common?
Let me put it in context. So you know the petition offers that they're volunteering curtailment of 1,500 gallons per day per vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes,
And yet the capacity on the vehicles is 1,200 gallons.
correct.
And what is the gas dispensing rate on these vehicles, if you know?
Maximum 110 gallons an hour.
And so that means it may take more than 10 hours of fueling to empty out.
Correct.
And do you know if any of the records show a single truck has dispensed more than 1,500 gallons in a day?
This is their proposed curtailing on operation if variance will be granted.
Do you know what their highest, I guess, what's their record for most
I'd
sales?
say maximum 20 to 100 gallon a day.
So that would be a case where they've gone to the dispensing rack twice.
Mhm.
And again, you said 100 gallons per hour?
110 gallons an hour maximum. It's about 4 minutes per vehicle, and that's the fastest they can go.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm curious, is that an actual case where a truck has dispensed 2,200 gallons on a given day?
Well, this is based on the operation of a maximum 20 hours a day.
Mhm.
So 20 multiplied by 110, I derived at 2,200 gallon a day.
Is that realistic? Is that they could get to that many vehicles to fuel them up in the course of a day?
It's worst case. You know, we we use a lot of worst case assumptions in the air modeling and health risk assessment to be conservative.
What's if you know, what's the average dispensing on a day for these trucks? What's the average? Is it just the 1,200 gallons?
Well, I could say, you know, if we use the, you know, the annual throughput, I will divide that by 48 weeks. I can say roughly 1,800 gallons a day.
Mm-hmm. The throughput is the maximum, correct?
Yeah, there is a maximum throughput that is based on operating 120 hours a week, 110 gallons per hour, 48 weeks a year, right?
Right. Do you think that 1,500 is a realistic limit on what an actual truck is doing?
It's doable. It's very easy to track because Booster has the dispensing tracking system.
I guess my question is that meaningful curtailment? Do the trucks get anywhere close to 1,500 gallons?
Well, you're talking about 6 MFOs and operating. So we will have to look through all of their records to answer your question. We are just, you know, at the moment discussing, you know, what is the maximum they can do. I'm estimating 2,200 gallons a day.
Have you testified before the hearing board before?
Actually, no. It's a pleasure to be here testifying today.
Are you familiar with the hearing board's guidelines on excess emissions?
I do not know it off the top of my head.
Are you generally familiar with the concept where excess emissions are emissions beyond what you are authorized to do?
Correct. I agree.
Do you think excess emissions could include the fuel that is dispensed in locations where you otherwise wouldn't be allowed to dispense fuel? Should I ask the question again?
Yes, please.
Do you think excess emissions would include the fuel that is dispensed at locations where you're not otherwise allowed to dispense? So the variance allows you to fuel in new extra locations.
We have addressed this issue from a different angle. We estimated emissions if Booster is not allowed to operate. Then the customers could go to the pickup truck model, and their emission is up to 50 times higher VOC emissions than Booster's operation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that we have an excess emission scenario here.
And would you concede in that way of looking at it, you're not using the hearing board's approach to excess emissions?
I don't think we did.
Okay. Your calculations do talk about VOC emissions, and I'm wondered if you could add that there's also benzene emissions within, or as a constituent within gasoline.
Correct. VOC emissions VOC is a criteria pollutant, as you know, and benzene is an air toxic, which is a fraction of the VOC.
Do you know the approximate fraction of benzene in a gallon of gasoline by percent?
Small.
Would it sound familiar? Less than 1%?
Correct.
Perhaps more than 0.5%?
I don't think so.
have you looked at the district's proposed, what we file as an exhibit on proposed conditions?
No, I have not.
Okay. In your work with Ramble, are you involved in applications for air permits with the district?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of our conditions cites a few rules. Rule 201, are you familiar with that rule?
201 is permit to construct.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Thank you. And are you familiar with the requirement of District Rule 212 called Standards for Approving Permits and Issuing Public Notice?
Yes.
And are there requirements for public notice in regard to potentially high levels of toxic air contaminants?
There is a requirement for public notices if you're within 1,000 feet of a school. And boosters MFOD is not a high level emitter.
Are you familiar with Rule 212 also having possible need for public notice based on air toxics risks, Rule 1401?
We have calculated all those emissions. Booster is below all those thresholds.
And is that something that the district would evaluate if a site-specific permit application comes in?
Yeah, I think so. The permitting engineers do their calculation as well.
They also validate that there aren't any public schools issues. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Are you familiar with District Rule 1401?
Yes.
And how might that relate to boosters operations?
We are required to conduct a Tier 4 human health risk assessment for every dispensing site. So I'm very familiar with Rule 1401. We are conducting Tier 4 HRAs for every application we have been preparing.
Okay, you do that for, just to clarify, you do that for every application you prepare or for every dispensing site?
Dispensing site.
So even though,
dispensing site application.
okay. So for example, you're familiar with the permits to operate that were issued in March for the trucks?
The various location permit, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And under the terms of those permits, Booster can establish new dispensing locations, correct?
Correct.
And when it does that, unless it goes above throughput or unless it's near a school, they are compliant. Would you agree?
Agree.
Okay, for those new locations that they would want to establish without needing to go back for another permit, you don't need to do a Rule 1401 screening. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct. The throughput limit on the various location permit is based on worst case scenario modeling. The district used the worst case meteorology for each county, and they established those throughput limit. In other words, they feel comfortable if booster remained below those throughput limit, they would be in compliance everywhere they go in the South Coast Air Basin. So they do not need additional application for dispensing sites.
Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with District Rule 1402?
Mm-hmm.
Control of toxic air contaminants from existing sources.
Existing sources, yes.
And in some cases, would it be that potentially one of these permitted trucks with a various locations permit is going to a existing source that already has a permit, like a Title V facility?
They do not service Title V facility as far as I know.
Mm-hmm. All right, to the extent they are adding to the emissions of an existing source, do you think there could be issues under District Rule 1402 that the district may have to look at?
So the threshold for boosters operation currently is 1 in a million cancer risk, in case you're not aware. And they do not service Title V facilities. So the modeling we've done, all the sites I have seen, all the applications we have prepared are all fleet type of services in the parking lot. For like Amazon, it's literally a warehouse.
And did you do any modeling for these locations where they're asking to increase throughput by means of a variance?
Okay, let me go back to the slide. Have we done modeling for? We're working on the one in Gardena right now. That's the only one I'm aware. In addition to the Anaheim DCX 8, which was rejected by the district due to lack of a fire permit.
Okay. And are you familiar with the requirements of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act?
Yes.
And are you generally familiar the district needs to consider at least whether CEQA pertains to any permitting action?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are fire authorities also subject to CEQA, to your knowledge?
I wouldn't want to opine on anything related to fire because I'm really not an expert on that.
And how long have you been working for Booster? Or
yeah, as a consultant, about 5 years. We started this journey with the R&D.
And with the 14 locations that are on the exhibit submitted yesterday, are you aware of any throughput exceedances in any month prior to this month for those locations?
I'm not aware.
Do you have any knowledge of the fire approval documentation or status for those locations?
Well, for instance, Gardena is within LA County fire jurisdiction. So I know we can go ahead, prepare an application and submit it to the district because the fire is clear.
Yes. Have you seen the LA County fire permit that was given to Booster?
Yes, they forwarded a copy to me.
Was that issued on April 13th of 2022?
Okay, then give me a second to find it. April 13, 2022, confirmed.
And are you seeing that as also it's signed by the inspector and it's also signed by Oliver Brown, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And since that was issued back in April, how many site-specific permit applications for LA County have been submitted? LA County fire jurisdiction, I mean.
LA County fire jurisdiction. We actually submitted an application for SMS transportation in Gardena. And Amazon DPS 5 in Santa Clarita.
And are you knowledgeable of the applicable fire jurisdictions when it comes to that list that's in Booster's slide deck?
No, I do not get involved in fire-related issues.
Okay. But let's see, just to pin that down, you're familiar with just 2 site-specific applications that were submitted for LA County Fire?
Yes, we prepared them, we submitted them. So yeah, I can confirm for sure. I see 2 applications were submitted that are within LA County jurisdiction.
And what's the status of those been issued, the AQMD permits?
Okay, so AQMD issued 2 permits to operate for site-specific location dispensing. One of them is Amazon in Riverside. The other one is traffic management in Signal Hill, which is within LA County Fire jurisdiction. We submitted the application on May 4th. We got the permit on June 22nd.
And maybe you can answer, I'd asked earlier, the other witness, does Regulation 2 set out time limits for the district to act on applications for permits?
I want to say yes, but I haven't looked at the Regulation 2 lately. I want to say they have up to 180 days to issue the permits, if I'm not mistaken. And Booster is paying for expedited review for every single one of these applications. We're paying the 50% surcharge.
And are you also familiar with the need for the engineering and permitting division to make some judgment as to whether an application is complete before it might continue processing it?
Yes, I'm aware of that, which is why they rejected the Anaheim Amazon application, because we could not provide a written fire approval. And they said, we're going to reject this application. We're deeming this as incomplete.
And for permit cases that actually need to go through public notice, would you agree that having a complete application may be important for interested members of the public?
I agree.
Thank
Which
you.
is why, we have been withholding some of the applications for the sites that we don't have a written fire approvals for.
Mhm. Are you withholding applications on for these withheld applications? Which ones have you done the HRA and the modeling for, if you can share that, or how many have you?
Yeah, I just want to correct myself. It's a joint effort and communication with Booster, because they have a team and a consultant working on the fire approval front. All Rambo does is to wait for Booster to tell us which ones we should be preparing applications for.
And are you offering that clarification because you're involved on a group text chat?
Group text chat, I haven't looked at this lately. Yeah, we have a group text chat.
Okay. Just wondering if you wanted to opt that clarification.
No, I haven't looked at
Oh,
the text
okay.
chat lately.
Okay. Thank you. You were helpful, and I passed the witness.
Thank you.
Glad I can help.
Okay, Mr. Balagopalan, did you have a question?
Yes,
for Ms. Tan?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
To see you, Ms. Tan. Let me start with the emission calculation. Currently, on each of those 6 permits, there are in condition 41 and 42 throughput limits. 41 has for each county, and 42 has monthly max. So, is it correct to say that as long as they don't exceed those monthly or the throughput for those locations, there is no excess emissions?
Yes.
And there shouldn't be whatever the risk was calculated, it should not be exceeding that risk level either if they don't exceed those throughput limits.
Correct.
Now, one of the mitigation measures offered by Booster was that they can limit the emissions to a pound or less a day. Now, is that something that your Environ will be helping them? Is it, no, I'm sorry, it's not Environ anymore.
It's fine, Mohan. It happens all the time.
Okay.
We were in Environ for too long.
Too long, yes. We'll be helping them with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now let me just go back a little bit on the emission factor that was used in your, and I assume you prepared those calculation which was in the petition. I did have a question on the hose permeation. You know, the default factor is 0.009 per pounds per 1,000 gallons. I noticed you came up with a number that is based on the length of the hose and the diameter of the hose. And so this says an upper limit. Is that like 0.0268 pounds per day? It almost seems like a limit there, regardless, you know, because based on the diameter and the size, the length of the hose. But
Yes.
if you have more throughput, the emissions can be higher than that.
The emission factor for the hose permeation is just based on the hose length and diameter, not based on throughput.
Actually, it's pounds per 1,000 gallons. So in that sense, if there's, you know.
No, all the other emission factors are in pounds per 1,000 gallon, except for hose permeation.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, so it's about 10 grams per square meter per day.
Right, I
That's
saw
the-
that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the emission factor for hose permeation only. So it adds a little difficulty for our technical work. Every time we try to calculate the emission, we have to make sure we single out the hose permeation and combine them at the end.
Actually, I would suggest you go back and check it because it's not, you know, it is based on pounds per 1,000 gallons. But let's move, you know, so that may have to change because, you know, if you go back to the ARB's documentation or AQMD, it's the factor is pounds per 1,000 gallons. So that might change a little bit.
Yes,
Based on if they got more gallons going through.
I agree.
Okay. Now, the other one I was kind of surprised to see is you added the transit emissions. That's not associated directly with the refueling. So why did you add transit emissions? Because you're not adding what do you call loading emissions.
Oh, transit losses.
Yeah, while they're traveling, you know. It's
I
conservative.
think-
I'm not, you know, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious why you added that, and also a very conservative number too.
Breathing loss is not a transit.
Yeah, it was listed. Yeah, it was.
Maybe that's a typo.
Okay, all right, because it says it's actually, then the factor you got was AP42, which is for transit loss. So, okay, all right, that's breathing loss, which is you use a surrogate for breathing loss. Let's put, okay, okay with that. So let me move on to the modeling. You said you did different scenario. I'm sorry. What scenario did you use for your tier 4 modeling?
Scenario meaning, so we have.
Did you use an underground storage tank with the canopy and the volume source and all that?
So we don't model for stationary gas station for booster. We model their MFOD.
M4, okay.
Yeah.
So you took, you had a whole different scenario of release points then.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a complicated. You know, we first look at the booster's customer site, and we establish the property line, and then we ask a booster, where are you allowed to dispense? And then we would place different sources on the property. And then we run the air dispersion model, and then we pick the worst case source
Okay.
location.
All right, okay, that helps. That's good. Okay, that helps. Now let me go back, and while I know Booster has removed the request to look at the schools, but since it's in the condition and so forth, and this issue was raised by Mr. Thomas Helwig, specifically 1401.1, you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm,
And that's for risk near schools.
mm-hmm.
Are you aware of the exemption in 1401.1?
1401.1 exemption
For portable equipment?
for portable equipment.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I can say I'm very familiar with the exemption, not off the top of my head.
Okay. It exempts sources that are near a school if they're portable, and portable means they're not more than 12 months at that one location.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me see what else. I had one other one. Oh, yes. I'm trying to understand, and this is new to me, and I've been, as you know, worked 30 years at the AQMD. There is various location permits that are issued, which is for, you can take it to different places. And typically, I've seen maybe one case where there was a public notice for a various location, because, you know, where there's a public notice. Otherwise, and I think that was a scenario where they were there for a long period of time. What is site-specific permit for this MFORS? And why? How did that come about?
Say that again.
No, we hear a lot. We've seen in the conditions, and also, and Booster's concerned about getting site-specific permits for the MFORS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this, so the permits were not issued to Booster, but to the source, like Amazon.
Yeah.
Where now the equipment that comes in, is it Booster's imports?
So the permit issued is site specific, but Booster is the permit holder for the dispensing location.
And it's the M4 that comes and goes?
Yeah.
But it was still done, but it was permitted. Where did that requirement come from to get a site specific permit for a mobile unit?
Oh, good point. It was a meeting with Jillian Wang and Jason Asbel. We went through their various location permit and permit conditions during that meeting. And we raised the question, you know, this throughput limit in condition 41 is extremely low, as you are aware. And so what if, you know, Booster has a customer that needs more than this throughput? And the answer was, then you will apply for a site-specific permit for the dispensing location. That was the answer.
And typically, do the site-specific locations get higher throughput?
Correct, because we would use the meteorological condition that represents that particular site, rather than the worst case met condition used to establish these throughput limits in condition 41. Okay,
all right, that explains how site-specific for a MFOD so it's still listed as a MFOD, but it's located at wherever the site is.
Yeah, it's a new experience for all of us. It feels like a double permitting to me. Booster has permits for their MFODs, right? But then they still have to get another permit for dispensing location.
Okay, all right. I think you answered my question there. Thank you, Ms. Dan.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Pearman, did you have a question for this witness?
Yes, I just want to try and get a sense, and the witness may have just touched on it, but in their PowerPoint, they mentioned the exhaustive list of sites for which Booster is seeking variance. And my question was the kind of, I guess, ceilings in the permit section 41 and 42. does Booster exceed those limits in all or most of those exhausted sites, would you say, if you know?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll try another witness for that. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for this witness, board members? Okay, if not, Mr. Tomasovic?
One follow-up, if I may. Or line of follow-up. Ms. Tian, were you involved in the rule adoption of 461.1?
Well, I participated in the working group meetings. I get as an attendee just to listen.
Was the understanding that there would be requirements for site-specific permitting part of the governing board's understanding at the time of rule adoption?
I would have to say no. That was not abundantly clear during the rulemaking.
Okay, so the aspect of fueling near schools, you assume Rule 461.1 allows issuing permits that would fuel near schools?
.461 has a requirement not to fuel within 1,000 feet of a school during school hours. As I recall, that is 461.1.
Mm-hmm. In order to issue the permits that were issued in March, the district does go through an engineering permit evaluation, correct?
Which permit are you referring to?
Any of the six. Are you aware that engineering permit evaluations are conducted for every permit that gets issued?
Yes.
And that includes going through whether all requirements are met and whether there may be a need for public notice?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Were you party to stationary source committee meetings and discussion of Rule 461.1?
I believe I attended one meeting, stationary source meeting that discussed the 461.1.
And you don't recall any discussion of site-specific permitting at that stationary source committee?
I do not recall.
Is it possible that it was discussed?
It's possible.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tomasovic and Ms. Dion. Any other questions, board members, for this witness? If not, okay. Mr. Height, did you have anybody else you wanted to present?
Actually, Madam Chair, do you mind if we take a short break? I don't know how long we've been going on, but
did you want to take 15 minutes? Is that sufficient?
would that be all right?
Sure, we can take one now.
Okay.
Yes,
And
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Tomasovic?
perhaps when they come back, if they have a witness who could answer the question I asked Ms. Chan that she couldn't answer, I would appreciate that.
Yes. Is that
We will.
possible, Mr. Height?
Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Tomasovic, did you have a question or comment?
I welcome the break too, but I just wanted to give advance notice. If petitioner wasn't planning to call Taylor Henderson, then the district would call Taylor Henderson.
Okay. All right, so we will come back in 15, what's it, 20 minutes that you needed, sir, or 15?
Just 15 minutes.
Okay, we'll come back in 15 minutes. And we will pick it up from that point. And if you can have that question for Mr. Tomasovic, as well as if we have any other questions regarding the line of questioning that we had before. So I appreciate if you could get that for us. But Mr. Pearman had that question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we're off the record.
Your call cannot be completed.
Dr. Bernstein? Dr. Bernstein?
We're on a break right now. He's
Yeah.
probably not listening.
No, I'm here, Faye.
Okay, I just wanted you to check your email, please. I sent you an email.
Send me an email. Nope, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Faye.
Hey, Paul, you there?
Mr. Balagopalan, that I like your background. I think you changed it. It's not a real one, is it? But I want one like that because it makes me look very learned. Oh, it's real. Much better. Big tomes of knowledge.
Well, half the books are my wife's, so.
Okay, we're just missing Dr. Bernstein. And Mr. Tomasovic. As soon as he comes back, we'll resume. There he is. Okay. All right. Mr. Height, did you want to present some information, or did you want to go to another witness? And before you do that, I saw Mr. Ali. Did you have a question, Mr. Ali?
Yes, I just have a question. I've sat quietly and I've listened attentively. I've jotted down a few copious notes within my mind, but I'm trying to understand if Mr. Tomasovic has raised a concern and a query relative to the authority of the hearing board. I believe we ought to seek a legal opinion on what he raised, because we've gone on throughout the entire day listening to testimony, and the hearing board might not have jurisdiction over certain elements. And because you raised that concern, I think that we have a fiduciary responsibility to seek out the truth as opposed to continue on with the hearing as it stands.
We could do it one of two ways. We can either go ahead and listen to what Mr. Height was going to present and all of that information, or we can go straight to Mr. Tomasovic. But you're going to get you have to also give the opportunity for Mr. Height to give his opinion as well. So it might be better. We might be better served if we just go ahead and follow the process and let them make those statements in their closing statements. And I'm hoping that it won't be too far from now. I think if we go through the information that's going to be presented right now, and then we can possibly go into closing statements, unless there are a lot of questions, I think we'll be able to maybe see it a little bit better, have a better picture. Did you want to say something, Mr. Height?
Yes, Madam Chair, and absolutely, we could address that issue in the closing comments. And I just want to let you know, we certainly are prepared to answer Board Member Pierman's question, but otherwise, we presented our entire case. I understand Mr. Tomasovic wants to question Mr. Henderson. We didn't present him as a witness, so we're assuming Mr. Tomasovic has questions on new areas. We would just ask that he limit his questions to new areas and not duplicate questions that have already been addressed by Ms. Tian and Mr. Brown.
Unless they weren't answered. So I would just say that unless they were not answered, Mr. Tomasovic still would have the right to ask those questions. So let's go ahead and do that then. You wanted to present any information and answer Mr. Pearman's question, Mr. Height? Let's go ahead and do it there. Thank you, Mr. Ali, for pointing that out, and we will try to push this forward so we can get an answer to your question, because it's a valid question.
And Mr. Henderson is prepared to answer Board Member Pearman's questions and then any others that Mr. Tomasovich may have. So Taylor, why don't you state your name again and your position with the company, spell your name, and how long you've been with the company.
And that you took the oath this morning.
Correct.
Certainly. My name is Taylor Henderson. That's Taylor, and last name Henderson. And yes, I did take the oath, and I've been with the company for a little over, well, right about 4.5 years. And my title is Public Policy Manager.
Thank you, Taylor. Go ahead, Brian. Or do you want
Were you going
Taylor?
to?
Why don't you answer Board
Mr.
Member?
Pearman is the one who had the questions.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Sounds good.
Mr. Pearman?
Oh, I can restate it. I just wanted to find out to what extent on this exhaustive list of sites, do all or most of them have the problem from your business standpoint that they exceed the ceiling or floor, however you call it, in the typical conditions 41 and 42?
Certainly, Vice Chair. All but 3. The 3 that we had operated that say paused at, I can try and share my screen again, but on that slide 10, those first 3 right there, everything else, well, all but maybe 2. So I would say 3 to 5, because maybe 2 of the others, but the other ones do need a site-specific permit. And we have been held up on doing so due to the tie to written fire approval to get that.
And any idea of the range or dimensions of how much they exceed those ceilings or floors, however you call it? Is it twice, 10 times? Any sense of that?
$20K per month.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Henderson? And board members, and I'll go to you, Mr. Tomasovic. Go ahead. Well, Mahan, did you have a question?
No, I was going to say Mr. Tomasovic
Okay.
probably should go
All right.
before we go.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Tomasovic.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, I guess my questions start with slide 9, where you have the complete and in progress chart in regard to fire authorities.
Certainly.
I was wondering if you could confirm testimony, because it was unclear, sorry for this, by your colleague, Mr. Brown. I thought I heard him say variance releases sought as to the in progress light green locations. Is that the entirety of where you are seeking variance relief? Those light green jurisdictions?
No, and that's what I was trying to, I think that even Oliver, my boss, was trying to get at is it's not necessarily just a light green. Light green is where we're still working on those fire approvals, but fire approvals were needed everywhere. And so even in the dark green areas where we had to force the fire approvals to put things in writing that had already been approved in the past, slowed the process for some of these site-specific permits that were required.
Mm-hmm. Well, the second line on that chart is LA County Fire. Do you agree with the prior testimony about getting the written permit from LA County Fire back in April of this year?
I would have to check on, I don't do work in the compliance area, but it would have been in spring of sometime.
So does that mean in terms of the need for site-specific permits from AQMD, you could have applied for those permits beginning from the time of your LA County Fire written approval?
Not necessarily, because again, AQMD has been questioning written fire approval or just fire approval in general since I've been here under research and development. So it's almost like we have to prove that fire is okay with our operations just in order to generally operate.
I believe we heard that you have submitted site-specific permit applications for LA County Fire. Is that correct? At least 2?
Certainly.
And those are in
we've submitted applications under LA County.
and those site-specific applications from AQMD are in progress, correct? They have not been rejected by the district.
I apologize for interrupting. That is where I was saying I would need to know with compliance. I don't know where they're at in terms of the process. So our compliance team would know better on that.
Who is the compliance team at Booster? How many individuals is that?
Well, I mean, everything is pretty much hands-on, but right now there are 2 people who are designated for compliance.
And are you a member of the policy team at Booster?
Yes, sir. Oh, hello?
I think Brian froze.
Brian, are you still there? No, he's,
I turned off my screen due to connection issues.
okay.
If I'm being heard, are you a member of the policy team at Booster?
Yes, sir.
And how many individuals are on that team?
That would be right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us.
And does that team give the authorizations to launch sites for new customers?
In terms of, do they give authorizations? I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. Authorizations to actually launch a site? No, I mean, there's multiple things that you have to do to launch a site. So it has to do with ops and policy, and so there's multiple teams involved.
Does the policy team have oversight on whether fire approvals are adequate?
Yes.
And how is that different from compliance, the compliance team you're mentioning?
Well, I mean, compliance is part of policy as well. You were just asking very specific questions about where we are in the process on permitting, and that would be compliance tracks that. So everybody has roles. We're a very lean team, but everybody has specific roles that are required to. We wouldn't even have a CARB executive order. We wouldn't even be able to operate in South Coast if everybody wasn't, on their P's and Q's.
Are the members of the compliance team also on the policy team?
Yes.
Thanks. I just want to go through page 10, the locations that you offer as the exhaustive list. Are you knowledgeable in who the fire jurisdictions are for this list?
Yes, because I've also worked in that area as well. With OCFA, I've been very, very close with OCFA. Great. So I can tell you.
Well, I'll ask. DXL9 in Culver City, is that LA County Fire or LA City Fire?
So that one, I believe, is LA City. That I would have to confirm with the compliance team again, because Culver City is within the city of LA. And if you've ever looked at, which I'm sure you have, the LA City jurisdiction map of fire is very, very intricate. But I believe Culver City actually does fall within that.
And just to clarify, is the petitioner looking for variance coverage for this dispensing location in LA City Fire?
Certainly, and for reasons, I think that's one thing that got actually misconstrued or misunderstood earlier, is we're not looking to operate there. We're looking to say, once LA City signs off, to give us coverage until the district can permit, because that's what's been blocking us for quite some time, is even with LA City. LA City could say, we're ready to permit next week, for instance. We can't, because the district has been unable to move on these site-specific permits that required written fire approval. That should have been actually probably moving months ago.
DPS 5, Valencia, is that under LA County Fire?
That one I would have to check with my colleague who works in compliance. I'm not as familiar with Valencia.
You can't refresh your recollection with any notes about who the fire authority is?
I can tell you that I have a very good understanding of relations with OCFA, LA County, LA City, but there's 83 municipalities alone in OCFA. So, or again, that's to my recollection, there's over 80. So,
Right, right. But when it comes to fire approvals, I believe your colleague said there's approximately 15 that you've engaged.
No. And I think that's what is getting, counties and localities are different. So counties will actually have jurisdiction. For instance, I can tell you this, OCFA has jurisdiction over specific, where people like Irvine, for instance, contract OCFA. They don't have their own independent fire authority, whereas there's other, like Newport or Huntington has their own independent fire authority. So
for this list of exhaustive sites, you don't have that sorted out, who the responsible jurisdiction authority is?
No, we certainly know. I could.
Do you have notes?
Pull up another list right now if you want me to.
Please do.
Okay.
That would have been nice to have had in that presentation.
Is there any way, thank you, Madam Chair, is there any, would it be nice, because again, these same exact areas we've submitted to the district in the past. Is that something that you want us to put on exhibit?
Well, but you're asking us to make a decision based on these sites today. And as Mr. Tomasovic is saying, I think we need to seek which authority is over those specific sites that you're asking us to consider.
That's certainly fair. I can.
Do you have a list of a slide like that?
Yes, ma'am. I'll have to pull up our compliance slide right now. I mean, I can tell you right now, or I can submit it as an exhibit. It's up to you. It's up to you all.
Well, my hope, Mr. Henderson, would be to, if you have a list of the jurisdictions next to these sites, you should be able to answer my questions pretty quickly. And I'm also relying on your experience as someone who's, I believe, has looked at the state code and the municipal codes for these jurisdictions. So I hope it can move smoothly. I don't know if you can answer this question in bulk, but this is at least the information as I have it, and maybe you can confirm it or disconfirm. DPS 5 is in Valencia. Zoom Transportation is in Sun Valley. DLA 8 is in Hawthorne, and Zoom Transportation is in Gardena. And
LA County.
All of those are LA County Fire. Would you agree?
Correct.
And we could also add on DD06 in Torrance. Is that LA County Fire as well?
Yes, but you could also add on Brightview Landscapes, which is Fontana, which technically is under LA County. However, they have an independent fire department where they have not contracted with LA County, if that
Even
makes,
though they're in San Bernardino County?
was-
Fontana's in San Bernardino County.
or excuse me, that's right. Yes, Madam Chair. But that's a good example of Fontana being in a county, San Bernardino, who has given us an approval. However, they have not contracted with the county, and they've withheld basically their ability to be independent, if that makes sense. It's not, they don't call it joint power.
So this is similar to what I saw. Brightview Landscapes in Fontana is under Fontana Fire District, correct?
Correct.
And they have some support relationship with SB County Fire.
And SB County Fire would normally handle, exactly. That's what I was trying to get to. But they have their own independent, basically they've held out on utilizing SB Fire's services to the full extent, if that makes sense.
And if we really dove in, Fontana Fire District has a municipal code, correct?
Correct.
Or the city of Fontana does, and it includes a fire code.
Correct.
And as is rather common, these fire codes will say they adopt the California Fire Code and then make any adjustments from there, correct?
Certainly.
Do you know if Fontana is under the California Fire Code 2016 or 2019?
That I do not know, but I can tell you that 2016 follows the 2015 IFC and the 2019 follows the 2018 IFC, which did not change with respect, except for 5707, which is not what we're asking for.
And did you look at the district's exhibit E, the fire code in regard to operations in commercial and industrial areas?
Oh, 5706. I just know it off the top of my head, but I can pull it up if you want. Or you can just go. Yeah, I know it.
With your knowledge of municipal codes, and we could add Temecula, Fullerton, Cathedral City, Huntington Beach. Are these municipal codes by and large adopting that same rule language or code language that is in the district's Exhibit E?
And I think that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good point of confusion is you can adopt the IFC under the CFC, and then the local municipalities can adopt parts of the CFC and amend certain situations. A lot of times you'll see that mobile fueling under Chapter 57 is prohibited. Chapter 57 is what is with respect to consumer campus fueling. It has nothing to do with respect to 5706 or fueling in environments that are, and I think that's the key here with fire is it's about fire safety standards. It's about variables at play. They want to know that is this enough to the public or is it not? And so I think that's the key.
So not to cut you off, but my question is, do the municipal codes, as far as you know, including the 14 on this list, adopt what we have as Exhibit E, which is not the same as our Exhibit D?
All of them that I know of adopt 5707, or it could fall under Chapter 23. They're going to allow it in terms of on-site fueling that I'm aware of. On-site fueling can go under quite a few different provisions. So you'd also have to look at Chapter 23. That would be like installing an above ground storage tank. It's an on-site fueling operation rather than an app-based where the public is present. I think that's the big confusion that I wish everybody would get clear on it.
And I guess aside from the wording that is on Exhibit E, Booster is aware that there are jurisdictions insistent on site-specific permits, correct?
Certainly.
Like OCFA insists on site-specific permits, correct?
Well, we force them to. So if you actually go back to Brian Healy's email, you'll see he asks mobile or fleet. Reason being is because fleet is not it's not accessible to the public. It's treated very different than mobile, open to the public. And so you'll see in that email, he says continue on because there are other factors involved. There are site supervisors on site. There are CUPA filings with respect to the fleet side of business. We have not done, you actually introduced 5707. That's been paused for over 2 years. We haven't done that. We helped develop it, but we haven't done it in a while.
Okay, so the OCFA email is from 2020, correct?
Precisely.
And I'm asking, as of today, is it a requirement of OCFA that you apply for site-specific permits, which includes a site-specific plan and potentially an inspector going out to see and verify, oh, here's where the storm drain is, or here's how the lighting looks, those sorts of considerations?
That has always happened. That's what I'm trying to tell you, is that and I apologize, but that has always happened. And so that is a requirement today in writing. They actually had to make a special activity permit just to get it in writing. And that's only because we have really good relations with them and we've proven ourselves to provide the district, because the district wanted it in writing. Prior to that, all of those things you just outlined were always required. If they rolled through and saw us operating within 15 feet of a storm drain without a drain cover, operating without hydrophobic absorbent fuel pads or lighting.
So there's no confusion. I'm not asking whether you might be subject to inspection while you're dispensing. I'm asking giving advance notice to the fire authority and giving the fire authority to have a look prior to dispensing. Is that what you say you've always done?
There's not a place we operate where fire has not been notified. And that actually speaks to the reason we've never had a notice of violation from fire in Orange County or LA County.
You mean under your current permits?
I mean, I guess before I was here, like 4 years ago, I would have to go back and look. I'm saying, like, even through research and development, there's the only NOVs that ever came were from the Air District.
You are aware, and this was covered at the interim variance just briefly, but there is a past notice of violation issued in regard to not having fire approvals. That was part of the district's request for official notice.
Where was that?
The district filed a request for official notice before the interim variance hearing.
I would have to look with compliance. All I'm saying is that fire does not hit us with NOVs like the Air District.
Right. No, I understand. So you're saying that the fire authority has never given you a notice of violation for.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the Air District. The Air District hits us with notice of violations all the time.
Okay, well, just so there's a common understanding, there is an old notice of violation from the district that concerned a lack of fire approval. Does that ring a bell for you?
That absolutely rings a bell, and that's what was so infuriating, is the fact that you remember the prior hearing to where the district actually gave us a notice of violation based upon fire approval, when indeed we had fire approval. I think the district actually tried to launch an investigation with LA City based upon environmental claims, and that fell apart for reasons unknown.
Have you looked at the municipal code for Huntington Beach?
I have not. That would be the compliance team.
have you looked at the municipal code for, the fire code, I should say, for Cathedral City,
That would be the compliance team.
Temecula,
That would be the compliance team.
Huntington Beach? I guess I'd already asked that. I guess one more question here. Well, two more. DXL7 is in Cypress. Bemis Landscape is listed as Dana Point. Those are both Orange County Fire Authority, correct?
Correct.
And you do have a permit process from the fire authorities for OCFA, correct?
Correct.
And your amended petition represents that as something that's complete, and there's also verbiage about it taking 2 to 3 weeks. Are those representations correct?
It depends, but yes, I would say those are around correct. Yes.
But you're asking for variance coverage that might allow you to operate in OCFA without getting fire approvals in writing?
No, that's what we're trying to say here is, are we going to operate where fire does not say we're approved? Never. With that, the business would never have even survived if that was how we operated. Fire has to say okay. It may be verbally. What we're saying is we would like to get going on, I think you brought up Cypress, DLX7, the district won't even get going on these permits until they have something, written fire approval, whereas, to be quite honest, OCFA is a good example. We already had approval. We are forcing them to create constructs, develop divisions. There's a whole new net. They're basically creating something because the district is requiring them to do so. And I will say that on the mobile side, that was never the case, or it was always the case. We had to get written fire, and I say mobile, I should say public, consumer campus fueling, like Irvine Company. Yeah, we always had to. That's why it was always limited to Irvine. But with fleet, it has always been different. And so if the fire says, we've always had those approvals, we just want the district to start working in parallel.
As you've looked at fire codes, have you looked around at other sections in terms of knowing what fire authorities do?
I mean, I'm not a fire expert, but I do look at a lot of codes, yes.
Sorry about that. Well, I guess my question is it a fact that fire authorities issue all kinds of permits?
Certainly.
Beyond mobile fuelers, which may be unique, they've always issued various kinds of permits, correct?
There's a ton of different permits in every realm we deal in, yes.
And so when the state fire code has language like you have in Exhibit E and talks about issuing a permit, would you say that suggests giving something in writing?
I apologize. I was just wanting to clarify. Exhibit E is 5706 or?
Yes.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up because 5707, per what the fire has said, would always require that. 5706 in terms of the industrial commercial fleet, not always, no. And reason being is 5707 was first adopted in the 2015, it was the 2015 IFC. And so basically that is pretty new in terms of mobile fueling where public is present or could be. That's obviously a big variable. And that's what fire wants to know about is this is about public health. I don't want to make it new because it's about public health and safety at the end of the day. And those requirements have been there forever. And so with respect to a closed off fleet site that is not accessible to the public, that is an on-site fueling area. That's been happening for decades. 5706 has been there for quite some time. The NFPA, if you're familiar with that, there's two model codes, IFC and the NFPA. The NFPA under fleet actually already adopted in class 1 because they foresaw all of this. IFC is now wanting to do the same, and I have a lot of contacts in the fire that say the same. If that answers your question, that's why it's treated differently, though, is not particularly gas versus diesel. It has everything to do with control variables.
Back to the exhaustive list. I'm looking at the top 3 there. Brightview Landscapes, Bemis Landscapes, Golden Age Dental Care. Does Booster intend to exceed the throughputs at all of those sites?
Hold on 1 second. I can actually tell you. No, wait. Brightview. No, it's not even close, actually. No, not even close. I mean, we're looking at monthly throughputs that are 1,000 gallons.
Okay.
381 for Golden Age.
I imagine the same. Yeah, the dental care business is not a business that needs throughput.
381 gallons.
Maybe if you have, what month of dispensing records are you looking at?
I was just looking at, and again, that's where I'd have to, I get these numbers from ops. I don't know, but
you don't know what month?
I can say, no, they're just saying number of monthly gallons expected. So.
Oh, I see.
So 381, I can tell you if they came up with 381, then that means it's going to be a very low side.
Are you familiar with Rule 461.1 and the permits require the submission of monthly throughput totals? Are you familiar with that requirement?
Yes, sir.
Has Booster followed that requirement?
Yes, sir.
And timely submitting throughput amounts?
Yes, sir.
Do you have access to those spreadsheets for recent months?
Again, I would have to, that's the compliance team. My colleagues would. We submit, oh no, I have access to them, but not on the fly. That's my colleagues submit that monthly. It's not just that. We have to do a lot of work. So it almost takes a whole team dedicated to just exactly what you're talking about, fulfilling monthly requirements in terms of reporting for AQMD.
Have you ever submitted a monthly throughput total, either under the current permits or the?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the one under research and development who came up with kind of the constructs. Yeah.
Have you made any throughput submittals in the last 4 months?
No, that's where we have a whole process now. It's fully automated.
Okay, who's the person that does that instead of you?
Well, my colleague Mide is the one who oversees that. But like I said, under the last iteration of research and development, we had to figure out, well, it was actually the one prior to that one, that was pressure temp, but the one prior to that was automating a system that tracked, I mean, there's a ton of conditions. You have to track fuel movement. I mean, the AQMD put us through the ringer on research and development, which was expected and appreciated because that made us better. So it's what led to the executive order.
So you don't have any ability to pull up, for instance, the Booster June throughput submittal?
It would take me some time because again, we store everything. You want me? Yeah, I don't, not right now.
And last time you testified that your Booster had, I believe, 20 dispensing locations.
No, I mean 20 dispensing locations. No, we were talking about fire authorities.
Okay. How many dispensing locations, to your knowledge, does Booster Fuels have in the district?
Again,
under the definition of Rule 461.1.
Certainly. Again, that was asked during, I think the interim, and I would not be able to give you an accurate number off the top of my head. We can only operate at places that are where we're compliant.
Mhm.
But I can tell you from July 1, how many we had to cut is a lot. And all
Yeah.
they already testified to that, and they weren't happy, but
How many did you, how many did you cut? As far as you know, how many did you cut as of July 1?
I think per Ollie's statement, I think you already testified to that. I believe it was 16. If I heard that right.
And which fire authority jurisdictions were those 16 in? Or whatever the
That
number may be.
I would have to see a list of all of those.
Would you say that they are mostly in LA City Fire and Anaheim?
No, I mean, I would have to see a list of.
Okay. Can you say any of the names of these jurisdictions where you may have discontinued as of July 1?
Name the jurisdictions or the clients. I guess
Name the fire authorities. What fire authorities caused you to evaluate to drop 16 sites on July 1?
It wasn't the fire authorities, it was the district requiring that authorities put it in writing. So I think that's another confusion, is it was getting them to put it in writing. So Anaheim is actually a pretty good example. So Anaheim talked to the fire marshal quite some, we talked 2 years ago, a long time. But at the same time, when you ask them to put these things in writing, now again, we have to delineate between mobile versus fleet, or I should say public versus fleet. But on the public side, for instance, in Brian Healy's email, where he's asking mobile versus fleet, if we would have said it's mobile, he would have said, no, we don't have enough time right now. We have to slow down on, but on the fleet side, there are other responsibilities if it gets to a level to where basically the Koopas are involved. There's multiple people involved.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Henderson. I'm just hoping that the information that you're giving us is going to give us the ability to make the decision today. So I know that there's a lot of periphery here and a lot of other segments of the business that you are talking about, but if you can keep it to what's relevant and give us that ability to make a good decision, that's what we're looking for.
Yes, Madam Chair, I apologize.
No, I don't, I'm not trying to reprimand you. I'm just trying to get us to the point, because I'm also going to lose a board member a little after 3. So if we can keep on this going, but make it as relevant as possible.
Yes, Madam
to
Chair.
what we're looking at today.
Yeah, Mr. Henderson, in terms of the 16 sites that were dropped, is that a definite list that the district could ask for separate from the hearing? Not now.
That I'm unsure of.
And is that a list that's definite in the sense that fueling was terminated as of July 1 at those locations?
Yes, we will not fuel anywhere where we're not allowed to.
Okay. So and I'm looking at, you don't have it up, but I'm looking at the June throughput submittal. Does it sound about right? You might have 4 locations in Anaheim.
Again, I would have to reconfirm.
You have more than 1 location in Anaheim, correct? One.
What? Again, I would have to confirm with ops. The only location, it's an exhaustive list that we provided you, and there's only 1 Anaheim site.
True. Your throughput list that you submitted for June only had 31 locations. Does that sound about right?
Say in June.
All right. What's the longest list of locations on a throughput submittal that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I would have to look again. That's so highly technical. I'd have to go and pull up these records, and I can go and pull them up, but
Okay.
Fine.
And you understand that Booster Fuels is the petitioner today, correct?
Yes,
And it has the burden of demonstrating that the 6 findings are met,
certainly.
and the burden of persuasion. This was covered at the last interim hearing.
Yes, I'd say we've done so.
I will move on. I will pass the witness, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. So Vic and Mr. Henderson. Board members, do you have any other questions for this witness?
No, I don't have any questions, but I'm just trying to understand his testimony and how is it germane based upon what was stated earlier as far as jurisdiction is concerned. I think that issue has to be cleared up. And we still have yet to really unearth that point.
I agree with you. And hopefully, like I said, they're going to bring that forward and make it a lot easier and more crystal clear for us. And Mr. Balagopalan, did you have a question? You're muted.
Mr. Anderson, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Booster is looking to permit more site-specific operations.
Yes, sir, if required. And if we exceed throughput where required, yes, sir.
Because you want higher throughputs at those locations.
Yes.
And what you want, and what I'm hearing from the different, and I could be wrong here, is you want the district to accept, even if they don't get a formal in writing, even a verbal authority should be sufficient for the district to start accepting application for the site specific.
Correct.
Is okay. All right. That's what I thought you were getting at. Let me ask one final question here. Has the approval, or does the approval by the fire department in any way increase or decrease emissions from the import?
No, sir. Oh, well, I'll backtrack on that. Is we're never going to operate in a place where we're not approved by fire. But for instance, if it's not in writing in the district.
No, and that's not my question, Ms. Anderson. Sorry to cut you off. You know, the rule is very clear. It needs fire department authority, and we've been going quite a bit on that. But my basic mundane question probably is, with or without fire department approval, does your emission profile change?
No.
If you're operating it properly?
No, the emission profile is always the same. The only difference is we always have to be within 25 meters away from, yeah.
Right. All those criteria. Okay. All right. That yes or no answer. So is it?
No, the emission profile would not change. We have
if you're operating it as per the permit, M4 certification by the state.
Correct.
And the throughput limits imposed by the agency.
Correct. It's 100% ORVR. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that it, Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Any other questions, board members, for this witness? Okay, and that's the end of your witnesses, Mr. Haidt?
That is correct, Chair. We also want to note that we've sent to the clerk that list.
Okay, great. Mr.
Ina,
Tomasovic, did you have anybody that you wanted to present?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, so, and that's just the list of the stations that we were considering and which fire authority they belong to. Is that correct?
It added the fire authorities that
okay.
to that list, correct?
Okay, I'm pulling that up right now. Okay. All right. I don't really think we need some time to look at it because I think it's pretty clear. Board members, did you need any time to review it?
No.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go then to closing statements. And if you want to start off, Mr. Height?
Madam Chair,
Yes?
even though the district has no witnesses, I did have some questions for their counsel as it relates to their proposed conditions and a legal question, if I could.
Okay,
Thank you, thank you.
okay.
Let me try and lower my hand. All right. Mr. Tomasovic, first, in the permit conditions 43, which basically says that to go with the limits in 41 and 42, you must have an active site-specific permit to operate issued by the district. What's the source authority for the language requiring an active site-specific permit to operate?
This does tie in with the district's position that, and I think this was covered with testimony in terms of the intensity of the activity, the dispensing activity and the emissions activities at a particular location do push the limits of what we could consider falling under a various locations permit. And this was part of what was under really the purview of the governing board in adoption of 461.1. So it was always a view that the district, in issuing the research or issuing these regular permits, had to comply with CEQA, had to comply with its Rule 1401 in regard to toxic air contaminants. And the throughput levels were actually set to avoid the more intensive permitting that applies in regard to higher toxic air contaminants. So when it comes to those locations, Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, each having their own throughput amounts, that derives from the Rule 1401 assessment. How do the air toxics play in with what the district can freely offer for a permit that allows them to go and make as many dispensing locations as they want, generally, right? When it comes to higher throughputs, they're getting above those thresholds that were actually evaluated under 1401 and above perhaps what the district was looking at in terms of CEQA, and perhaps what the district needs to do under Rule 212 in regard to public notice. If toxic air contaminants are high enough, then that has implications of its own. So when it comes to what the district submitted as our Exhibit C, again, looking at the condition 3 in there, there's sort of a laundry list of background rules and permitting considerations that do apply. And I do think it comes into play that the amount of activities that would happen at one location once you're going above that throughput are in line with where we would ask for a site-specific permit, for both for public notice reasons and for protectiveness of the public reasons. So yeah.
All right, let me stop you there. So first, my specific question, is there anything expressly in Rule 461.1 that says you have to have the site-specific permit to operate in this circumstance?
You will not find express language in 461.1 because it comes down to the avoidance of issues at the stage of issuing the permits. So in issuing the permits, it's, will you be accepting of a permit that restricts you from fueling near schools, or will you be accepting of a permit that allows these throughput caps so that we don't have to work through Rule 1401 issues.
All right, and then you just touched on this, but if I understand you, the reason why you've proposed in your possible variance conditions, shall we say, an alternate way of showing a fire department either decided it didn't care about giving approval or it only give verbal approval, you applied that to the condition 19 circumstances, but not to the condition, if you would, 43 circumstances. And the reason is you feel, for these reasons cited in condition 3, that there are these other overwhelming policy toxic reasons why you have to have this, if you would, higher, stricter view there. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it goes beyond policy. I think it's a legal restriction, and thinking that the district's hands may be tied at the permitting level of giving the higher throughputs. So the engineering evaluation is what came up with those throughput limits and side by side with Rule 1401. And so there is a problem, or there would have been a problem at the get-go of the district trying to give a higher throughput number. And if this were instead under the avenue of like a permit appeal because they didn't like the throughput levels, which the hearing board has seen before, then it would be, I guess in that setting, it would be the district having at least a little onus of trying to explain further how that works. But this is not, as I said, a permit appeal. So the validity of the throughput limits, as the district would the district's position is the validity of the throughput limits isn't specifically an issue here.
Well, I agree. So my focus is on the language. Condition 19 talks about providing documentation to South Coast AQMD from the responsible fire department that it's approved. 461(1)(g)(4) talks about approved for operation and writing by the responsible fire department. So the language is the same in both. So I'm having a hard time understanding that you say there's a legal reason why you have to interpret it one way in your proposed conditions 5 and 6, and not otherwise as to the condition 41 so-called situation. And so I think clearly there's some policy reasons, if you would, and even reasons supported by the various rules et cetera you cite in 3. But if you're saying there's some legal prohibition against this, if you would, alternate way of expressing local fire department approval in writing, I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, thank you. I do think in the background, in considering each of the permit applications, there is engineering evaluation that goes on. It includes, like, is this an application for a Title V facility? These are the bigger facilities that have their own special permitting considerations. And it includes things like CEQA and Rule 1401. So I wouldn't deny that there's policy aspects to it, but there are also legal aspects. And I can point back to the Health and Safety Code section I cited earlier, and perhaps this is I'm not opposed to Mr. Hite giving his own spin on this, but section 42350, when it comes to what is a allowable variance, is what's within the authority of the hearing board. You can't give a variance from the requirement to go and get a permit. And so there is an aspect to, I think, what petitioner is asking for, that short circuits the permit process that the district has in place, in the sense of allowing dispensing activities and emitting activities that would be new and beyond what is allowed, because it was always the vision of the district that site-specific permitting is going to be needed and important once you go beyond the throughput requirements.
So, Mr. Tomasovic, are you saying then that when everything that we've heard today, boiling it down, the bottom line is that are you saying that the hearing board doesn't have the authority?
I think Madam Chair, I think there is a legal problem in increasing these throughput limits, and I don't think it is the same legal problem that you have when a refinery comes and asks for a variance to increase its throughput. I am familiar, and you all are familiar with the fact that that is something that happens.
Yeah.
So there's a qualitative aspect here of what's being allowed at a location that is not otherwise being tracked and not otherwise gone through the hoops of permitting, and that includes public notice, etc. So it is kind of novel territory, but at the same time, I don't think it's a matter of something that was decided at a meeting of involving like the heads of our permitting office in the last year. It's more like, no, this is consistent in the thinking of the district from the beginning of trying to think about how research permits worked for booster,
Mhm.
thinking about how schools conditions work. So the district never has, we don't get variances from the requirement to look at Rule 1401 and CEQA and all that. So we have to try to fulfill California law. And so it is an issue if a variance kind of thwarts or goes around that process.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I initially had proffered the idea of the board seeking legal opinion relative to this matter, and I'm going to bring it back around again. I am not in a position to render an opinion today. We've spent an inordinate amount of time listening and debating provisions of rule and ARB and other government code sections. We need a formal opinion from an outside counsel, an impartial counsel, vis-a-vis what Mr. Tomasovic has stated, and perhaps we can bring the item back, but I'm in no position to vote based upon what the attorney of the district has stated on the public record.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Pearman in reference to Mr. Ali's comment. Mr. Pearman?
I'm not sure exactly what is the legal question that is being raised, apart from the discussion just now from Mr. Tomasovic. So, Mr. Lee, exactly what did you think was the legal restraint that he felt that we had, and you want him to try and express again?
Well, he's expressed it, Mr. Pearman, and he said that there was a potential overreach, and he questioned the jurisdiction of the hearing board, but we've gone on through the hearing. So it would make sense that we would at least seek an outside opinion based upon what he has stated. He represents the district. I believe that's impartial and would be unbiased.
Well, I don't know what his questioning is. I'd like to hear it again. One option is not to necessarily go outside, but just both lawyers could brief it and then we could decide, or we could take their brief, so to speak, and then ask our attorney to weigh in on that. So there's a couple of options to handle that if we want a legal opinion.
Okay, so then perhaps we could do exactly what you just stated. Both attorneys can caucus, and then that is offered for review to outside counsel, and then the board can come back and render an opinion.
But just before we decide that, I would just like to hear exactly what is the jurisdictional defect that the district is raising that might require this process.
Okay, so this is what I propose. Then I think we need to hear both sides. We can still make that decision. It has to be put to a vote, but I do want to hear from Mr. Height as well on this. And like I said, we can make that decision after we hear both sides. I know that Mr. Balagopalan, you had a comment?
Well, since we're asking Mr. Tomasovic, I want to follow up with Mr. Pearman. Quick question: was there anything in the staff report that went to the, or anything that went to the governing board in the adoption of the rule, which is specifically for mobile fueling operation, that talked about permitting for a site specific?
A question for me?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So my understanding from staff, and this is not a witness I have queued up to testify, is that the issue of requiring site-specific permits was covered with the Stationary Source Committee. It was transparently part of the district's considerations throughout the rulemaking process, and it has been even prior to adoption of Rule 461.1. So you refer back to the permit appeal. We had
And sorry to interrupt you, but my question specifically is, was that it went to the governing board? Was there anything in the package that went to the governing board that specifically talked about that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Bernstein, did I see your hand up or no? No. Okay. All right, so let's just.
Chair Verdugo-Peralta, can I just make a comment?
Well, I was going to defer to you to start the closing statement. So if you want to ask a question, or did you want to start your closing statement.
I'm a little confused as to where we're at, because it doesn't sound like the board's going to take our substantive request for a variance under consideration.
Well, yes, but we haven't heard from you, Mr. Height, and I personally want to hear from you. I think my other board members want to hear from you. And yes, we need to make that decision, because right now I think it's clear as mud on a lot of issues that we have to be able to make a decision. And the exhibits that have been presented to us, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but it's not taking us to the point that I feel, as Mr. Ali has said, that we are going to be able to make a decision one way or the other. I think there's still questions out there, and they are legal questions that we have, whether we can go ahead and consider this regular variance.
My initial comments on this issue are, number one, we submitted a application for a interim variance a long time ago. And we went through that interim variance hearing on this very subject matter. And then we submitted another application to the hearing board, which was received and accepted, and there were no issues at all raised by anybody at that time. And then we even submitted an amended application. The AQMD hearing board did not reject it for lack of jurisdiction. It was accepted. Then we filed, as required, an opening brief going through all of these arguments in great detail. We spent considerable resources providing notice and opportunity for the AQMD council to raise any issues during this entire process. The AQMD council decided not to even file a response, a formal response to our opening brief. I believe that issue has been waived by the AQMD hearing board and the AQMD council, and it's unfair to this company to now raise that issue to further stall these proceedings, which is exactly what would happen. Because if you're going to ask us to file briefs now on an issue that should have been resolved a long time ago, it's extremely unfair to the company. And then on top of that, there's a request that those briefs be reviewed by yet another third party. We believe the jurisdiction lies here with this AQMD hearing board, including the counsel for the hearing board as a member for these very types of issues, which should be addressed by the hearing board itself and not seek outside counsel. It's unfair and prejudicial to this company to be now asked to be put in this position where it has to provide legal briefing on jurisdiction when we're at the end of the case. That doesn't make any sense procedurally or in any fair sense. And so we would ask that the hearing board itself resolve that issue here today so that the company can get a resolution one way or the other. We've been open to discussions with the AQMD council. We've exchanged various forms of the proposed conditions. The fact that the AQMD council provided us and the hearing board with conditions to a variance suggests on its face that there's jurisdiction here for the hearing board to handle this issue. So it's going to be patently unfair to stall these proceedings on an issue that's unclear like that. We have provided a very clear set of conditions, all 6. We went through all 6 of them. It's a AQMD rule that can't be complied with. There is no question about jurisdiction here. And we believe, based on the questions that were asked by AQMD council regarding issues that have nothing to do with what we were seeking, including the lighting at a particular facility and CEQA and all kinds of other issues that just don't apply. We believe that it's an inappropriate way to respond to 6 very straightforward sets of findings that you need to find. And it seems very strange that the AQMD hearing board would now be deciding whether or not it's allowed to review this. And we believe it's very clearly within your jurisdiction. And it would be unfair to now ask us to go off on this direction of questioning whether or not you have jurisdiction. So I
Okay,
just want to make this
number
preliminary
one, Mr.
statement.
Hyde. Number one, Mr. Hyde, when you submit a request for a variance, and we accept it, that doesn't mean that we are going along with what you are requesting. That means that we are going to have a hearing to do so, just like we are today. There were many questions that should have been answered by your compliance department, and they're not here, they're not present. There were many questions that Mr. Brown could not answer. And we had those questions. They're still unanswered. Mr. Henderson did his best to give the information, but he still was not able to because he's not in the compliance department. So, I understand your position, but I also have to listen to my board members, and I have to listen to everything else that's in front of us. So, let us go through this process and let us make this decision. We haven't made that decision yet. So we're discussing it, we're deliberating on it, and let us get to that point.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comments.
But I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. So are you going to then consider that your closing statement?
Well, I'll make my closing statement very brief, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the board, is that we requested a variance. It's very clear which rules and conditions that we're requesting a variance from. The company will not be able to comply with those rules. And it was beyond the control of the company to come into compliance with that specific rule requirement regarding written fire approvals. The company's made clear that it worked very hard to try to accomplish that job, and it is making progress. There's a lot of positive things happening here, and the company is committed to complying with all AQMD rules and conditions. However, this particular new rule change that came out, and with the very short time frame to come into compliance, was just not feasible. On top of that, the fire agencies that they're working with have never before dealt with a written fire approval requirement for this type of operation. So all the parties that were involved with it had not dealt with it before. And just to add further to the issue is that AQMD, when it made its rule, didn't provide a sample type of approval document that the booster could just simply give to the fire authorities, which would have made the process a lot quicker. So with all that, there was just no reasonable way for the company to come into compliance in a timely manner. As testified by the company's experts, it will do everything it can to reduce emissions during the variance proceeding or variance process. It will provide all documents that are requested by AQMD, all emission levels, anything that the AQMD requires. And in addition to all of that, and not to be repetitive, but the company will suffer economic harm and possibly loss of jobs, which is something we're all trying to avoid. We believe this hearing board is here today to help businesses with new advanced technology. And we believe that's really what the mission is of this hearing board. It's not to obstruct and to limit this new technology, which clearly is going to reduce emissions and reduce the number of trips to gas stations and ensure that professionals are handling large fleets like this when they're being fueled. We think that's great technology that should be supported and encouraged. And that's why this variance process is here, because as you can see, and as you all well know, it's extremely complicated and difficult to maneuver through all these different rules, regulations, permit conditions, and statutes. Any small individual company trying to maneuver through this, as you can see, it is just pulverized by the process. Booster's not a large company. I would consider them a medium-sized company. And they're working overtime expeditiously to work directly with AQMD on a daily basis using extreme resources to ensure compliance. it should not be overlooked that Booster has been so diligent in its communications, written, oral, meetings, everything with AQMD staff and all the fire authorities to maintain and be in compliance. When on the other hand, you have Booster's competitors that are zooming around town in smaller trucks that nobody disputes that their emissions are much worse. So if the variance isn't granted, there is going to be an impact on the environment. It's going to increase emissions because these other customers of Booster will go and fuel somewhere else. There is no question about that. They have to fuel their vehicles. So we really encourage the AQMD hearing board to look at the 6 factors, see the presentation, and know that it does have the authority to allow this variance for a very short period of time so that Booster can finish doing what it's doing and get those written approvals while it's operating. And we do believe that we've satisfied all of the conditions that this hearing board needs to make that finding. And with that, we respectfully submit back to the hearing board.
Thank you, Mr. Height. Okay, Mr. Tomasovic.
Thank you, members of the board, for all your patience throughout the long hearing today. I do want to start off by reading part of the resolution at the adoption of Rule 461.1. Whereas the South Coast Governing Board has determined a need exists to adopt proposed Rule 461.1, and then I'll continue on, requiring record keeping to ensure health risks are not exceeded at any dispensing location, and so on and so forth. So that just goes to earlier questions about the extreme significance that the district placed on and thought that was put into giving proper throughput limits that weren't appealed when these were just issued in March and April. So in the ordinary variance case, there is some potential for good exchanges of information, and hopefully parties can come forward with proposed conditions that they jointly agree on. This is not one of those cases. I don't know that it boils down to a question of hearing board jurisdiction. It's more a matter of what's in the proper authority of the hearing board. So a slight distinction, but it is at the end of the day, in this case and every other case, that the hearing board needs to hear the evidence and be able to make the 6 findings. And in the background, the decision of the hearing board is potentially subject to the oversight of the California Air Resources Board. So doing weird things in a variance and coming to a weird order with weird conditions is problematic, not just from that aspect of the hearing board being bound to make the 6 findings, but also in terms of what it means as a follow-on matter. Every time the board issues a variance or an order for abatement for that matter, it is district staff that are committed to tracking and making sure that there's compliance with what the hearing board sets out. So that's why we dedicate time and attention to figuring out what's appropriate and what are the right conditions in a way that makes sense and doesn't waste resources. Coming to the 6 findings, and I'm not gonna walk through our proposed conditions. I think they illustrate for us the hiccups and the stopping points that are significant to us. But to even get there, you need to be able to make the 6 findings. Finding number 1 is whether a petitioner is or will be in violation. And unfortunately, I think it was a shoddy and somewhat inconsistent presentation in regard to the list of sites. So on the one hand, they are saying we will not be fueling that location until we get a fire approval. And then on the other hand, they're saying, but we need that in order to have increased throughput, which implies that, yeah, they want to go ahead with dispensing and without going through the process of applying for site-specific permits to increase the throughput levels. And if they actually do that, I think if you look at the permit conditions, it's already set up. You're not violating your permits if you have a site-specific application that gets granted, and the district is already granted 2. I guess I understand and hear their testimony that it takes a while, but their own witness, Ms. Tien, had offered that by the terms of district rules, yes, you can pay expediting fees, but up to 180 days is sometimes what companies have to put up with, even as the district is working to issue quickly. I don't think there's anything in the record or the evidence that says the district wasn't working in good faith and it isn't continuing to work in good faith to issue applications that are already in-house. But just at the threshold, is the petitioner in violation? I guess if it doesn't want to apply for site-specific permit applications, yeah, you will be in violation going forward that way. And we don't see a way around the requirement that you have to apply for the site-specific permit application. So that is the disconnect. And at the same time, I think there are a few locations where witness Mr. Henderson had said, hey, we're not even close to throughput exceedances at those locations. So, okay, why are they on the list? So I apologize for the drawn out testimony and trying to clarify that. And I would have liked to have tried to clarify it before the hearing, but the district staff that were kind of dedicated to looking at this couldn't iron it out. And that's part of why this got drawn out today. In regard to the district waiving objections and all that, I'm sorry, but go ahead and look at the opening brief and look at whether the opening brief had talked about throughput increases or the permit condition relating to throughputs. It didn't. It wasn't a helpful brief. The district didn't have an obligation to respond to that. That seems to be the centerpiece and the focus of what they really want under the variance. And I just dispute the fact that that is what was seen to be the issue at the interim variance, or clearly seen to be the issue in the petition as filed. And it's just not the issue in the opening brief. The district didn't have to respond to that. All right, to move on to finding number 2. Due to conditions beyond reasonable control, compliance is an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property. I think we can set aside it's not about practical closing of business, but maybe it's about these existing customer relationships. I guess that's the argument. I believe this is a kind of novel, unprecedented argument that is not helpful for the hearing board to adopt, because it seems any kind of business could approach and ask for a variance because, hey, we want to increase our revenue and we want to expand and have new customers. Well, that doesn't count as a loss or a taking to the extent you haven't already engaged in those activities or you're not already losing customer relationships. So it's not, we only got a glimpse of what's happening with these contract negotiations, I guess, with their big customers, but it's not on the district or on the hearing board to try to make accommodations, or what's worse, kind of allow Booster to set terms that make the case for a variance. It should be the case in any contract negotiation. Here's what we can provide in terms of our lawful compliance at this time. You can put your own adjustments and variations on top of that, contingency, so to speak. But it's not a matter of, I don't think it's a credible case that they put forward in terms of there's these millions of losses and those are attributed somehow to actions of the district. No, not for receiving applications and acting on them as within 2 months, which is the limits of what we heard with testimony. And we'd also heard LA County Fire. LA County Fire is at least 5 of the 14 locations. LA County Fire gave them a written permit back in April. So none of those locations, if I'm not mistaken, actually have, that they're asking for variance relief for, actually have site-specific applications submitted. No, it was in their reasonable control to submit those site-specific applications back in April when LA County Fire said you're okay to operate. Finding, and you do need to make all the findings, so I'm just going to skip finding number 3 and go to finding 4 about giving consideration to curtailing operations. This again is about whether the applicant has shown about curtailing operations. And unfortunately, I think that as a technical matter, what they presented is a faux consideration for curtailment. It's not, in fact, anything that limits what they'd otherwise be doing. And that is a possibility in terms of air permitting, where you have very high allowable throughputs, and somehow that is part of the permit. But the fact that you might lower that doesn't meaningfully impact what you're doing operationally. And I think that is, well, let me put it this way. I don't think the hearing board heard any testimony about it being a meaningful restriction on them. They did offer it up to try to check the box, but I don't think that's the spirit of the required finding about giving consideration to curtailing operations. At the end of the day, this is, I do think it's correct that fire authority approvals do not like straightly tie in with emission controls. There is an aspect of we need clear records and going out to public notice. Of course, it does not look, well, it's hard to envision how that works for the district to, for instance, issue a permit in proximity to a school when people call and ask, what about fire approvals? That was always just the consideration of the district in 461.1. It's not arbitrary, it's reasonable because it perfectly tracks with the CARB executive order, which is binding on the district. And it does seem to match the text of Exhibit E, which I provided. So we can accept the fact that fire authorities may sit on their hands and not be used to processing this particular type of requests that Booster may be making outreach to try and get. But on paper, the fire code for these municipalities speaks of getting approvals, whether it's the approval or the whatever the acronym is for an alternative approach. And the fire code speaks to site-specific plans that fire authority could look at. So we know in a few cases that there are jurisdictions that are insisting on these fire code approvals, and it's just not clear. It's not clear that it's helpful for us to issue a variance if it's gonna cause confusion both to those fire authorities and in terms of what the petitioner thinks it can do. Finding number 5 is about during the variance period reducing emissions to the maximum extent. There are excess emissions. I guess we are in maybe disagreement in terms of how those might be quantified, but I am hearing petitioners say there are excess emissions. Of special concern to the district isn't really the VOCs, although not from the perspective of ozone protections, but from the perspective of the air toxic requirements that do set the throughput limits. So yeah, we believe in any location, and it may well be the case. We're not disputing that it could be an industrial or commercial location. But in any location, we have to run through our permit assessment in regard to air toxics, and it can't just be increased to some amount, which I guess it appears to be the case. The petitioner has not even set an amount where it would increase the throughput. They volunteered that they'd limit to 1,500 gallons per day per truck. But in terms of a dispensing location limit, I don't think you'll find that in any of their filings. I think in sum, coming back to can the hearing board make the 6 findings? It is, as I said out at the beginning, highly problematic. I think that the district can't be in support of language games over the requirements for the fire approval. It's something that's set up initially by the CARBO, and our proposed conditions, if the hearing board does in fact believe it can make the findings and move forward, are a way of potentially playing it safe. You got a verbal approval or you got some statement that a permit isn't required, well, then please document it to the fullest extent. And you still need to proceed with site-specific permitting. That's just the district's legal position. We oppose any kind of variance relief for legal reasons that go beyond that. That concludes my closing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tomasovic. Okay, board members, who would like to start? I personally would like to hear from Mr. Pearman.
Oh, I have no great thoughts, but I do have just a comment. The district had asked for request for judicial notice. It wasn't objected to, but commented upon by Booster Fuse. I just want to ask Mr. Tomasovic, is that still a request he wants us to act upon, or is it stipulated to, or how should we handle that?
I believe, and Mr. Height, feel free to chime in. I think we're working under the assumption that the previously marked exhibits are considered admitted for these proceedings. So
that is correct.
As well as ours.
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, then they're deemed admitted. All right, thank you. And I have nothing special to say now. I'd like to think about it, but again, I don't know if Mr. Ali really, since he had raised that issue, I'd ask first if he or the board members still want to defer acting until they get that opinion or are ready to go.
Mr. Ali, are you still here? He may have left because I know he.
No, I'm still here.
Okay,
I'm still
good.
here.
Okay, did you hear Mr. Pearman's comment?
Yes, I did.
Okay, would you like to speak on it, please?
No, I don't have any comment or so regarding that. I just think that
You still feel that you cannot make a
absolutely. No, I do not believe that I'm in a position to make a decision. Think that we ought to at least seek, or at least have the lawyers to come back after they've had a chance to caucus.
Okay.
Jack.
Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, I am inclined to grant the regular variance, and I'll give you reasons why. I think the proposed variance conditions are a good compromise that the district had proposed. I think it laid out quite clearly that, if they want a site-specific permit, they have to apply for it. And, the board cannot grant that because that's a permit condition that they didn't apply in a timely manner. So, but we also heard, I think Ms. Masaba was mischaracterizing. They applied for 2, and they're willing to apply for more site-specific application. I think the one for Anaheim got turned back because the district said you didn't get the fire department approval. But but it's not that they're not wanting to apply for the site-specific location, go through the whole, you heard Ms. Stan's testimony for the site-specific. They have to do a more robust modeling to show using site-specific metrology that gives them a higher throughput, and that's the process they have to go through. And it does appear that they want to do that and willing to do that because they get higher throughput. The only thing I got from the testimony is that probably that the verbal approval, or until they get the written approval, or verbal approval should be enough for the district to accept the application. Maybe they don't have to issue, and work on it, and then so that it doesn't delay the process. That's all. I think the fact remains that we heard testimony, and I don't doubt it at all, that it is problematic trying to get all the different fire departments, all the different authorities to come together and give this in a timely manner. So they are working through that, and they have hired a consultant to do that, and we've seen the progress they've made from the last hearing. So I think giving them a little bit more the time till the end of December to go through all the different ones that they've already identified, no new ones, as indicated, and as a condition on the proposed variance condition, I think that's appropriate. I totally, so you know, again, I want to emphasize, there is no emission associated with this variance. There's yes, there is, they're asking relief from the approval process timing, but it's got not, there is no associated emission increase or decrease with that. So this is agnostic to its emissions. So in the, you know, the emissions are limited by the standards that the ARB has set for the man ports and the throughput limits and so forth. And they also said they're not asking for permit a variance or from condition 21, which is from a school. That's not, even though it, and I think the proposed condition states that clearly, the same thing, that no variance will be from where they, from condition 41, they have to apply. And I think they realize that, and they're doing that. They already got 2, we have heard, and they want to get more because they'll get throughput. I think you heard from Ms. Tian, for this various location to get one that is acceptable for different, all the locations, they do a very generic modeling, not site specific. Site specific, it's a lot more work. I'm sure that they, you know, they're charging a lot of money for their work for each site specific, because you have to use different modeling criteria and so forth and data. So I think what else? So the fact that the district, I think I applaud the district in the willing to take a verbal and until they get the written. I think that's a good compromise when I saw it last time and this time too. So that the only thing I would add is maybe that the district accept that verbal also for the deeming the application complete. And there is nowhere in the regulation, Rule 461, on, you know, to that, or any district regulation that I know, to deem an application complete, you need a fire department approval. You know, if that's the case, very few permits will be issued in a timely manner. As we all know, that's, you know, that's, though most businesses do get that, you know, building permits and fire department, all that when they apply. But a permit to construct, they have, once they get the permit to construct, they still have a year to construct it, you know. And what they are doing 1 year is apply for a modification, no, for a brand new permit for site specific location, which I think the district came up with a good compromise there, which I've never seen that before. But also to be able to provide a site specific permit for a various locate for a mobile piece of equipment, which is unheard of. But nevertheless, I think they've done it twice. They probably will do more as more and more applications come in. The only issue is timing. You know, they need more time to get the approval from the different fire districts, fire departments, and if we're accepting global, maybe if the district is willing to also accept global to complete or deem an application complete, so the process can move forward. And I think that's all what I'm hearing. So I can go through, you know, again, there's no, so they will be in violation, you know, they because they don't have the G4 with the approval from the fire district for the dispensing location. And is it beyond their control? I think we heard, you know, it has been a challenge.
Are you making the motion?
Not yet. I'm just going through this.
Okay.
I'm not making a motion. I'm just going
There's
through.
2 more people who still need to speak. So yes, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I can make the 6 findings, and I was just going through that, you know. And
Okay.
again, on the fact of the emissions, I think Ms. Thomas mischaracterized that. It is, there are no excess emissions. You know, the excess emissions is what is permitted and what's allowed. And if they are going beyond that, they're not asking for, or we're not granting at least the throughput increase. You know, they have to apply, which they have for 2 of them at least. So, and yes, are they mitigation? Yes, there is a mitigation by limiting the throughput for the existing ones. They can mitigate, you know, and if we're talking about a pound of VOC, and now Mr. Thomas, I would talk about toxics, but that is already looked at when the permit was issued for this various location. The toxics was the driving force, not the VOC emission. It was that was what was driving to keep the throughput levels below these levels for the different location. That was the health risk assessment. Also, may I want to point out that and they are complying with 1401, 1401.1 for these permits that have been issued. And there's language, like I mentioned, in 1401.1, which is one of the most stringent health risk assessment look at facilities near a school that exempts various location equipment. And even though we are now saying, okay, you're going to get a site-specific permit, it is for a various location piece of equipment. They can get a site-specific, let's say for Amazon warehouse, but they can also move it somewhere else in Chino and do some work and bring it back there. But as long as once at Amazon or wherever that location is, they have to meet that criteria. So I do believe, that we should, grant this variance, allow them to work through, and get the required written authorizations from the different fire departments while they submit applications to get site-specific permits, which they are willing to do. They have, preparing to do, and I think that they've been working with the consultant to do that. It's just exactly that.
Thank you, Mr. Balagopalan. Mr. Pearman, you had your hand up.
I had a question just for Mohan. So are you saying that you would essentially adopt the district's proposed variance conditions? Or are you saying you accept them, except you question or disagree with their proposed number 3?
No, I would actually accept all of it with the one, maybe, I'll accept all of it. I think it's a very good compromise condition, proposed condition. And I think they lay it out what they cannot get, what the board cannot authorize, which is like a higher throughput, condition 41, because they should have appealed that within the 30 days. That's a permit condition that they didn't do the appeal, that we don't have the authority to do that. I agree. I with the district on that. Also on the school site specific, I agree completely that, if they want to get that, they need to go get, do the site. I mean, so yes, I propose that we accept the condition as proposed. And the only caveat, and if I may mention is that the district will, since they're willing to accept a verbal for the rule, that also they accept that to accept the permit application for the site specific location. That's all.
So that's a good point. So I think that might be an area of compromise that I could agree to if this is what you're talking about, that with respect to the higher throughput, the condition 43, that if they're presented with these sort of alternatives to an express written statement, like they describe in their proposed 5 and 6, if they're presented with that, they would at least begin the process of going through the site-specific permit to operate, but they're not required to issue it until the rule is fully satisfied. Is that what you're trying to get at there?
Yes, exactly. Yes, because that gets the process moving. So that,
I like that. We give them what the district asked for, and then the only question is, so we don't hold them up, get the district to commit to, once they give them at least their own declaration that the fire department said, we don't give verbal approvals, let them at least internally start this longer process for the higher throughput application. Again, not requiring them to issue it until they actually get whatever they need under the rule.
And if I may add, once they pay the fees, we start the work, they don't get a refund. If they cancel the application, no refund. The district gives the fees because the work has been done or initiated at least.
So do we need to add any verbiage to, is it 4?
Conditions.
In light of what Mohan's proposing, I think what he's saying would be maybe after 3, because 3 starts off with you get no variance from condition 41 and saying, however, if the booster fuse presented, what's the language here?
Verbal statement.
If a fire department only provide a verbal statement of approval or verbal statement that approval is not required, that if they satisfy condition 5 or 6 is applicable, the district would commence processing of a site-specific permit to operate, but the issuance will still require otherwise complying with condition 41, et cetera. Something like that is what he's talking about.
I think that's excellent, yeah.
Okay, Dr. Bernstein, did you have any comments?
Well, rather than repeat what's happened in the last hour and a half, what I'm simply going to say is this. It is my opinion that Booster is trying everything and doing everything that they possibly can to protect the public from any toxic emissions. Incorporating advanced technology, modifying their operational status, doing whatever is necessary. They've already also concurred that they will not fuel near schools. They're not incurring to aggregate any new customers during this time frame, and they'll be limiting their dispensing to 1,500 gallons per day. I think maybe the language that we're looking for, it looks in condition number 4, there might be some of the language we're talking about because it talks about verbal agreements in there. So maybe Rob and Mohan could take a peek at that paragraph and then flesh out. That'll make it easier for them to flesh out what we want to add to the conditions. I also believe we should adopt the proposed variance conditions that has been placed forth by the district. I can, in fact, make the 6 findings to support the request for the variance. I also want to thank both Mr. Brown and Mr. Henderson for their extensive testimony today and answering multitude of questions. I also want to thank the councils on both sides for their diligence and their passion regarding this subject. And so in summary, yes, I can make the 6 findings to grant the variance with the modification of the condition that Mohan and Robert are figuring out now with the language with regards to the verbal agreement.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think
Verbal statement, sorry.
I think most of you know that I have always been a supporter and an advocate for new technology in any field, but specifically in transportation, because that accounts for over 90% of the emissions and the pollution in this basin. So when it comes to transportation, anything that we could do to alleviate the emissions and look at a new technology, look at a new way of doing things, I have always been for that. And I think even my comments when Booster first came to us on other items, but yet still about the mobile refueling, I think my comments were always very positive and wanting to be on their side. But there were stumbling blocks. There were stumbling blocks that, despite the fact that my heart was wanting to get them to succeed on it, there were legal points that I couldn't get over. And on this one, I hear all of the comments of my fellow board members, and I respect them. I appreciate also the both sides heartfelt comments that have been made by the people from Booster Fuels, as well as Mr. Tomasovic. I understand what Mr. Tomasovic is saying. I am concerned about it. I am hoping that whatever verbiage we put in there is positive and accepting by ARB. I'm concerned that ARB may pull this back. So if they do, don't be surprised, because we're looking at this and there are some legal problems with this. I see that. But the overriding, I suppose my overriding opinion of this is that I think we need to go forward. And if we're pulled back somewhat, okay. I don't like the fact that they're not getting information in regards to, even if it's a verbal communication from the fire authorities, you need to list them all, get the information, and let us see that as well. I think there needs to be more transparency in that. Also, as I had said before, you need to start your getting approval from the fire departments, and local as well as county. You need to start at the state level with the state fire marshal. I have said that over and over and over. And if honestly, if I were you guys, I would try to get a hold of the documents through the public, I can't remember what the verbiage is, but you can get a hold of the California Fuel Cell Partnership process and how they went from city to city to city to get approval for those hydrogen stations. And look how they did it, because it was a collaborative effort, and it was a good. We didn't get one that didn't want to go forward and do this as well. And like I said before, that's a much more controversial fuel than gasoline is. So I would take some lessons from that, get a hold of whatever documents you can, and try to do that as well. But bottom line, I'm going to go ahead and agree with my fellow board members, because this is always been, in my opinion, a good project. There have just been some stumbling blocks and some legal issues that were stopping you. And I didn't want to see that happen. I honestly didn't. I wanted you guys to get this going and do whatever you could to spread this and be a model for other companies in other areas. It is a good project, but you do have some problems with it. So I would look at it as well. I like the idea of what Mr. Pearman and Mr. Balagopalan have said in regards to changing and adding to the verbiage of 3 and 4. So with that, I respect the opinion of my fellow board members, and I can go along with them and make the 6 findings. I just, like I said, I am concerned that one stumbling block, number 1 of the proposed conditions, is going to be a problem. I hope not, but it just may be, and we may have to come back to this. So that being said, I will go ahead and let either Mr. Pearman and or Mr. Balagopalan make the motion. Mr. Height.
We just had one comment on if you were going to accept the proposed conditions to all of you, if we could, in section 9, change it from dispensing locations to existing customers.
In the first sentence?
Yes.
Are you accepting of that, Mr. Balagopalan and Mr. Pearman?
Existing sounds fine to me.
Only existing.
And I am also open, I don't know, to changing the date termination number 11 as requested December 31st, but leave it open. For the take out the word not, and it's not subject to extension. It's up to the board if they want to come back and make a good cause finding to do the extension or not.
Mm-hmm.
We've always done that. And I think
I agree. I agree with that. Okay, so we're changing the date on there to
December 31st.
December 31st.
And take out it's not subject to extension.
Okay.
And then can I give a couple of potentially typos to add to the district's proposed condition before Mohan makes the motion, Madam Chair?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Mr. Tomasovic has had his hand up for some time.
I'm so sorry. I didn't see that.
Don't
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Tomasovic.
Oh, very briefly, I might be able to help on typos as well. Paragraph 7s and 18 reference condition 3 or 4, but because of renumbering, those would be 5 and 6, where it says condition 3 or 4, it should be condition 5 or 6.
Brian, I don't mean to interrupt, but does somebody have control of the document where I can see the changes being made and that they could put it up on the screen?
I don't know that we can do that.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. I don't think we can. Mr. Brown?
If I may, I am opposed to the requested change to condition 9 language.
You're opposed to, okay, so you're not in agreement with applies to existing customers?
Because it would be expanding to new dispensing locations that have not been, I guess the question is it about expanding to new dispensing locations that have not been established prior to July 1? Because a fire approval is specific to locations and dispensing locations, not to the fact that this might be a customer.
Well, okay, but following existing customers, it says that were established prior to July 1 of 2022. You don't think that's sufficient?
It's just contracted customers.
This variance only applies to, and they had asked for existing customers that were established prior to July 1, 2022. You don't think that that's
How
sufficient?
about if we leave the word dispensing location for existing customers?
I would support that.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
Okay.
And forgive me, one more interjection, and Mr. Height can certainly respond. In regard to the idea of adding language about the district determining an application complete, I think I understand in principle the idea, but I think that language may be problematic. The current, I think the status quo is the district is not rejecting applications where we understand from the fire authority that fire permits are in progress. So OCFA is an example. And then in the case of others like Anaheim, we have rejected the one application. But I don't disagree with Mr. Balagopalan's point that we can't point to any specific thing about the criteria for determining completeness of an application that references fire approvals. It's just the matter of the district finding it problematic or objecting to language that says, like, the district permitting division shall deem applications complete. I don't think it's a question of the district wanting to do that, because we understand the concept of the variance relief is that permit processing will continue. So it's a caution area, as
What
I said.
number are you referring to?
This is in the concept of language that I don't know has been sorted out, but it was floated between Member Pearman and Member Balagopalan.
Number 3 and 4, you mean?
Yeah, it'll be a new, if I may, it would have been, in fact, if I may, why don't I read what I said just before, so it'll be in mind if he has to kind of parse it.
Thank you.
It would be after 3, we would have said something like, however, if the, let me see the language that I have. Oh, however, if the responsible fire department or other designated fire authority has provided only a verbal statement that the location is approved for operation, or only a verbal statement that approval is not required for the dispensing location, comma, and if in that case petitioner complies with conditions 5 or 6 hereof as applicable, district will commence processing a submitted site-specific permit to operate under permit condition 43 in its normal course. So I think that's the language that he's asking whether they have a problem with that.
And I would just suggest district shall commence language is a problem area. But if you would reword it in terms of it may allow for continued processing of the applications, or it may allow that the applications not be rejected and have further processing. It's maybe safer wording.
Are you in agreement with that, Mr. Pearman?
I'm trying to think.
If the responsible fire department What did you have after that?
Basically, as Dr. Burns said, I took the language in section 4, condition 4 now, where it says in the second line, responsible fire department. And I just repeated that through down the fourth line, dispensing location.
Okay,
So Mr. Tonzo's comment is something like, if they did that, meaning comply with 5 or 6 applicable, you would not use the alleged lack of written approval as a base for not processing the permit.
well, if you
that what you're
insert the
saying?
words may allow, then that takes away from a directive. Is that
I
correct?
agree. I don't know if Mr. Balakapon wants that type of option or wants them to do it though. I'd ask him.
Mr. Balagopoulos?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good,
I think the district has heard our position about it. So if they suddenly refuse to do any of these certain things, we'd have a problem with how they were interpreting our ruling.
Mhm. Okay. All right.
Chair Verdugo Peralta, I just wanted to get back to you on that change to number 9.
Go ahead.
If you would just consider it's stating existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1st. Is that okay?
That were contracted versus established.
I think we didn't have it that way right now. I think it was, but yeah, if we could, if it could be to the, some language consistent with existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1st. I'm sorry, dispensing locations with existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1st.
Okay, you're saying dispensing, not existing. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the new language
So
is
you're leaving the word dispensing in there.
yes, dispensing locations with existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1st.
Okay, well, actually, it says this variance only applies to. And then we are going to have dispensing customers that
No.
were. What are you changing there?
The dispensing locations remains there. We're just simply saying that this variance only applies to dispensing locations, and then we add in with existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1st.
Okay, with existing customers. Okay,
Okay.
all right, got it. All righty. Anything else?
One more thing, if I might, small one on 6D. 6D is in David. It talks about in the first line, in each statement, detail the circumstance of the verbal approval. Section 6 deals where they did not give approval. They just said you don't need our approval. So it should probably be verbal statement there in the first line of D of 6, verbal statement, not approval.
Okay, so you wanted to read in each verbal statement?
Just strike the word approval in the first line of 6D and make it verbal statement. If you read above, they're talking about statements, not approvals, because that section deals with only the authority said we don't need any approval from them.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I just got a note that if we could change the word or take out the word personal liability for the person who makes the statement.
Where are you? Which one?
Hold on. Oh, shoot, sorry, I just lost it. Hang on a sec. I'm not finding that. Hang on a sec.
If I can predict what that might be about and address it, I will. Under, for example, 6B, we have verbiage that says in each statement include the following. This is a statement submitted in conjunction with an application for a permit or at the request of an air pollution control officer. I don't know if that's what he's queuing on, but that is in keeping with health and safety code requirements that permit applicants cannot submit false statements in applications. So yeah, we are counting on accurate representations in anything that's signed and submitted in support of an application.
Yeah, I don't see the words personal liability anywhere. Where are you pointing to?
Yeah.
Well, what I was getting at generally is that we're trying to figure out if a booster staff person who's working on these statements has personal liability, or if it, we're trying to figure out the parameters of the statement or.
However, per the health and safety code, though, we need to leave that in there.
Just tell the truth. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're done. We're done with all of the corrections. Okay. Are you ready, Mohan?
Yeah, probably we'll need your help, Mr. Pearman, on number 3, but so yes, I will go. In the matter of Booster Fuels Incorporated, case number 6171-4, I move that we grant regular variance commencing today and continuing through December 31st, 2022, from the following rules and rules, excuse me, 403, but let me start with 203B, 403, I've written down somewhere. Rule of 461, sorry, 461.1G, 461 K2G, 461 M1, and 461 K2. For the applications that were submitted with the petition, and the application numbers are, let's see if I have those 6 somewhere.
The G67997.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, application number 629563, 629564, 629565, 629566, 629567, and 629569, and the respective equipment description listed on those permit application. For the various location permits, and the condition will be set forth as in proposed variance condition. I believe it was exhibit D or C. 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 C, with the following changes. And Mr. Pearman, feel free to jump in. Condition number 3 will be modified to state, however, SCAQMD shall accept verbal statement listed in condition number 5 or 6 to initiate processing. No, did I say shall? May accept, sorry, may accept verbal statement listed in condition number 5 or 6 to initiate permit processing for site-specific permit to operate.
I would just say maybe you might say proofs of verbal statements, because I mean that's what those are. Proofs, PROFs of verbal statements.
Proof, okay. Proof of verbal statement, okay. As stated by Mr. Pearman.
And where, Mr. Balakapalan, where would that be in number 3?
Number 3, where it says provided proof of verbal statement pursuant to condition number 5 or 6. Let me repeat it.
Come after 3, at the end of 3, I think.
Okay, because I don't see that language in number 3.
No, we're adding the word, the whole sentence after 3.
At the end.
At the end, sorry.
Okay, Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then I think we're going to make the change, as Mr. Pearman said, in 6D, from verbal approval to verbal statement. Change in condition 7, that should reflect condition 5 or 6, instead of 3 or 4. And then number 9, the change to shall apply to dispensing location with existing customers that were contracted prior to July 1, 2022. And condition 11, the date will be changed from November to December, and will remove the language "and it's not subject to extension." And that actually conclude. There are no excess emission for the anticipated.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Mr. Tomasovic, you still have your hand up.
I'll lower it, sorry.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and vote on it. Dr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Ali, are you still here? I don't think he is. Okay, Mr. Pearman,
Aye.
Mr. Balagopalan,
Yes.
and I also vote aye. So 4-0. So that completes the vote on this. I am very happy to say. Long day. Thank you, everybody, for all of the input. It was very important that we hear all of the comments that were made on both sides. And I thank Mr. Tomasovic very much for going through all of the findings for us and explaining it. And thank you, Mr. Height, for your comments, as well as Mr. Henderson and Mr. Brown, as well as Ms. Tion. This was really something that it's been a long time coming, and I'm so happy that it is a positive. I'm hoping that the district, since they did submit these conditions, this was, to me, a positive signal that there could possibly be a compromise here. So I'm glad to see that we were able to do it. So with that, board members, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow. And with that, this matter is closed and we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night,
everyone.
all.